4 minutes remaining. Three minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Three minutes remaining. Two minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Two minutes remaining. One minute, 30 seconds remaining. One minute remaining. Forty-five seconds remaining. Thirty seconds remaining. Fifteen seconds. Break ends in 5 seconds.
He's live. He's nationwide on CBS Sports Radio. This is the Zach Gelb Show. Here's your host, Zach Gelb.
From the place yet not overly ostentatious studios of Odyssey here in Miami, we welcome on in to a Thursday edition of the Zach Gelb Show across all of our great local CBS Sports Radio affiliates, Sirius XM, Channel 158, the free Odyssey app, and, of course, streaming on YouTube. Welcome on in, action-packed show. Today, Christian Hackenberg going to stop by on the Zach Gelb Show in about an hour 20 from now. Stuart Kovacs and Michael Samter back in our New York City studios, and we take you all the way up until 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. We have to start today's show, and you can always give us a call, 855-212-4CBS. That's 855-212-4227. And you can find me on the good old cesspool of Twitter and on Instagram, where I'm straight flexing at Zach Gelb. That's ZACHGELB. But we have to start the show off with the drama Dallas choking Cowboys. And usually we know what to expect with, America's team, where they'll win 11, 12 games in the regular season, and then come playoff time, maybe they'll win a game here or there, but when push comes to shove, they're going to come up small on a big stage. And there's really not much else to say at this point with this current Cowboys regime, but when you start to speak and show sensitivity, that's when I start to say, man, this team is really not ready for the moment, and it even makes me double and triple down on that statement that the same old Cowboys will show up when you expect them to in January. I was about to say February for a second, but we know there's no chance that the Cowboys are playing in the Super Bowl in Las Vegas. And there's a reason why this organization and this team hasn't got to a Super Bowl and hasn't got to an NFC title game since the last time they did so in 1995 is because you just look at the way that the team is constructed. There's a lot of good players. There's some really great players. But when I see Dallas, I just go, yeah, they're a good team. And when you get talked about and covered the way that the Cowboys do, I at least appreciate that the Cowboys players are getting annoyed with it. But to voice your frustrations about it now, like how Micah Parsons did the other day, it just doesn't make any damn sense to me. It'd be one thing if you beat the 49ers, but you lost to the 49ers. Not only did you lose to the 49ers, you didn't even show up against the San Francisco 49ers. And then the next week, because you grinded it out against the Los Angeles Chargers, a team that you're better than, but a team that you're very similar to, in which the Chargers are another team, that they're a good team. They're a solid team. Like, the Cowboys have a better coach than the Los Angeles Chargers. I'm not ready to say that Dak Prescott is better than Justin Herbert. You know, the weapons on the defensive side of the ball, I think the Cowboys have a much better defense than Los Angeles Chargers. But on the offensive side of the ball, you know, really outside of CeeDee Lamb, it's not as if the Dallas Cowboys are loaded with that many more better weapons than the Los Angeles Chargers. But just beating the Chargers shouldn't elicit a response from the Cowboys now entering a bye week that they need to go on the defense and they need to just show their sensitivity. And that's what transpired the other night on Micah Parsons' podcast. And we'll play you that audio in just a second. But the timing of it is what's surprising to me, because your team got emasculated on a big stage 2 weeks ago. And now all of a sudden, after one lousy win against an AFC team that probably won't even make the playoffs this year in the Los Angeles Chargers and is heading towards the direction of having their head coach getting fired, that's the game that you're going to pop off about. That's the game where you're going to say, oh, I'm sick and tired of the way that people talk about the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm sick and tired about the way that they talk about my quarterback in Dak Prescott. Well, it's very simple, Micah Parsons. You don't like the way that people talk about your team. How about your team shows up against the 49ers? Or how about your organization does something, as I said, that they have not done since the 1995 season? And I'm not even talking about getting to a Super Bowl. Just get to an NFC title game, for crying out loud. So I don't understand the Cowboys yapping this week, whether it's McCarthy, whether it's Micah Parsons. What is it going to accomplish? Just because Micah Parsons basically gets on his podcast and starts popping off and shouting about people that are talking down about the Cowboys and he's sick and tired of it, you think that's going to stop people like me? You think that's going to stop any other logical person that understands what your football team is? And we all know that your football team is fraudulent, where everyone goes, oh, how about them Cowboys? Oh, the Cowboys, oh, they're this wonderful team. Oh, they dress up as the part last year with back-to-back 12-win seasons. How'd the playoffs work out? What happened in the playoffs? Against the same team back-to-back years, your offense failed. So that's why there's legitimate criticism about the Dallas Cowboys quarterback and also this Dallas Cowboys team. And I don't think the criticism is rooted in a bad place. Like, sure, when you listen to me, I enjoy seeing the drama Dallas choking Cowboys be the drama Dallas choking Cowboys. But I think a lot of people, yeah, you could say that they get annoyed with the America team tag and all that. But a lot of people are just good football fans. A lot of people are just actually starting to get tired of seeing the same script year in and year out with the Dallas Cowboys, where because of how many Cowboys fans are, where how powerful the brand is of the star and how much we talk about the Cowboys and other people talk about the Cowboys with how big of a topic they are. The Cowboys are kind of almost as if that movie that you watch that's really good and you sit there with your significant other, you sit there with your buddies and you love this one movie. And when the movie goes through and you go through the plot, you know how the movie's going to end. Everyone knows the ending, but every time you sit there on the edge of your seat with your popcorn and your fingers covered in butter and all that, and you got some candy and like a soda or a club soda, whatever you're drinking, and you try to think that there's going to be a different outcome. And you try to guess what's going to happen in the movie. But you know what's going to happen. The Cowboys are the same thing as reading the same book 10 times. You know what's going to happen, but your brain tries to trick you into that the ending is going to be different this time. But I don't give a rat's ass what Micah Parsons says. I don't care how annoyed he gets. I know what I watch with the Dallas Cowboys. I know what these Dallas Cowboys are. They're the same Dallas Cowboys the last 2 years, and they've been the same Dallas Cowboys for pretty much the last 20 years. Well, they'll put up nice numbers. They'll put up a nice win total. Maybe some people will jump on the bandwagon, throw the cowboy hat on, and scream, "How about them Cowboys?" and be insufferable. But when the games get bigger, when the moment gets brighter, and when it is playoff time and it's put up or shut up consistently, this team is going to have the same damn result that they've had for the last 20-plus years. Well, they won't be going to an NFC title game, and you could forget about it. You could laugh that they would even be in a Super Bowl, let alone hoisting that Lombardi trophy. And it's in their head. They know what the conversation is about them. They know that they've come up short before on a big stage. There's a reason why in Oxnard 2 off seasons ago, in training camp, you have Jerry Jones like a buffoon sitting up there practicing raising a Lombardi trophy in training camp because he doesn't even remember what the Lombardi trophy looks like because it's been so long. So the timing of this is just bizarre to me because the criticism, it's not as if it's unfair. It would be one thing if the criticism was not warranted, and I could understand why the Cowboys would use their bye week to pop off and to try to take down people that are being critical of them. But when you have accomplished basically nothing this year, and I don't want to say the regular season means nothing, but when the regular season is marinated in, well, we know that you guys are going to be a double-digit win team. We all acknowledge, no one says, oh, the Cowboys suck. We all know the Cowboys are a good team. But there's a difference in a good team to a very good team, and there's a difference from a very good team to a great team. And the Cowboys aren't close to being a great team because they don't show up in the big moments. And you had a golden opportunity 2 weeks ago to shut a lot of people up and take down the San Francisco 49ers. If you did that and you beat the Chargers and you wanted to use your bye week to say, oh, everyone criticizes Dak, everyone criticizes the Cowboys, you guys are just a bunch of haters and it needs to stop, fine. Now, there would still be some merit to people saying, well, you got to show up and you got to go to an NFC title game. You got to go win a Super Bowl. There would still be merit to that, but the timing of it wouldn't make sense because the Cowboys would be giving you something that you could chew on and something that is being delivered to you where maybe it could make you alter and change the thinking of your opinion. But with what the Cowboys have showed the last 2 weeks, it just further reiterates what the feeling is about the Cowboys, where when you go up against another great team in the 49ers, you get waxed. You regressed. It wasn't as if you even showed up and you came down to Dak choking on a big stage like it did the last 2 years. The third quarter, the fourth quarter didn't even matter 2 weeks ago. And then you go up against an opponent in the Chargers who are like in your weight class, but you know that you're higher up in the weight class and you're perceived to have longer history and a better team than a team that's in the same weight class as you. And you're able to squeak by, grind out a victory where at times it looks like you were going to lose, and then you find a way to pull it out at the end, even though you were trying to give the game away to the other team. But coming off that game, it shows you how minor league the Cowboys are right now, where that's going to be the game that you're going to pop off, and that's going to be the game that you talk smack, and almost as if it should wipe away the massacre that occurred 2 weeks ago, which we all know it was an NFC game compared to an AFC game, and it was a much bigger measuring stick game and a pulse check for the Dallas Cowboys, because that's a team that you will probably face again at some point this year because the Cowboys will be in the playoffs. So after setting that up for you and voicing my opinion and just being clearly just like laughing at the frustration that you're hearing from the Dallas Cowboys, let's play you the clip. This is Micah Parsons on his podcast where his feelings were hurt about the way that people are talking about the Dallas Cowboys these days.
I just don't condone the bashing of Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys and have the same energy for the Eagles. We want the same energy for everybody because there's a whole bunch of bashing when it's Dak Prescott, but not the same when it's the Eagles. I got time today. A lot of people said the Browns defense was overhyped. I said the Browns are the real deal. Acho said this, which pissed me off. I'm not worried about the 49ers. They were missing Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel. The Browns were missing Deshaun Watson, Nick Chubb. They were missing them key factors before the game even started. So why is it that we are just scrubs and we're nobodies that don't deserve to be on the field and we're just all talk? But there's 100 excuses for these other teams. If y'all just gonna hate Cowboys Nation, just say y'all hate Cowboys Nation. I'm tired of people trashing my quarterback. I'm tired of people trashing my team. And that's why I had nothing to say to the media this week.
So we know Micah Parsons is delusional. He's a great football player, but he's delusional. Like, remember the cuts we played from his podcast after they got destroyed by the 49ers? He's like, oh, we're only a few plays away. There's not that big of a difference between the Cowboys and the 49ers. Well, the win-loss column, they would say there's a big difference the last 3 years when you guys have gone up against one another, and the Cowboys have not found a way to get a victory the last 3 times they played the San Francisco 49ers. And for him to say, and it just shows you how soft the Cowboys have become and how sensitive the Cowboys have become, where he's going to say, oh, well, I see people making excuses for the Eagles. I see people making excuses for the 49ers. Well, the 49ers wake up each and every year in the NFC title game. Now, they haven't won a Super Bowl, but they own your ass, and they're in the NFC title game each and every year. And the Philadelphia Eagles, last time I checked, they were the NFC representative in the Super Bowl last year. So those teams get the benefit of the doubt. Those teams, after one loss, I'm not going to freak out about the 49ers. I'm not going to freak out about the Philadelphia Eagles, because you can't freak out after one lousy game in the NFL. With the Cowboys, what do you want me to say? What do you want me to do? Why do you want me to give your team the benefit of the doubt? You guys haven't given us anything to make me suggest that this year is going to be different than the other two. And to make matters worse, it's even regressed to a spot where at least 2 years ago, you have showed up in those games and then you failed down the stretch. Where this time around, and what happened 2 weeks ago, you guys didn't even have a pulse right out of the gate. So it's just an absolute joke that the Cowboys are running and running their mouths off this week. Let's hear from Mike McCarthy. This was on the Fan in Dallas. Mike McCarthy elected to defend his quarterback in Dak Prescott.
What he endures mentally and emotionally compared to the other 31 is unique. I've never seen, and speaking on experience of being around great quarterbacks, I've never seen a quarterback under a microscope like he is, and he's been dealing with this a long time here. The intensity is like I said, nothing like I've ever seen.
Come on. You coached Aaron Rodgers. You have coached in a league that has had Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, who early on in his career couldn't beat anyone in the postseason. I'm playing a small violin for Dak Prescott and Mike McCarthy that Dak is under the fire with a lot of criticism. And don't tell me that Dak's this great quarterback. Dak's a good quarterback. Dak's a very good quarterback. but he's not someone that makes me shake in my boots. He's not someone that I'd say he's a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. And if you don't want criticism directed to the way of Dak Prescott, tell him to show up in the last 2 playoff games, something he didn't do when his defense played his ass off. So all this stuff is just ridiculous. It really is. It is absolutely ridiculous that the Cowboys are this sensitive. And I actually thought they were better than that. I did. Shame on me for thinking the Cowboys were better than that. Not that their team is this great, wonderful team, that they wouldn't get so annoyed about what's being said. Because almost everything that's being said about the Cowboys is fair and it's accurate. And if you want people like me to shut up, then go win games when they matter. Go to an NFC title game. Go to a Super Bowl. And don't just sit there and bitch and complain and whine and go, oh, people hate us. Oh, this is unfair. The criticism about Dak. Oh, people just hate the Cowboys. They make excuses for the 49ers. They make excuses for the Eagles. Stop with that nonsense. Stop with that baloney. Stop with that hogwash. Because you don't have a leg to stand on this year to voice those concerns when your team 2 weeks ago got destroyed by the 49ers, and now we got to throw a party. Now we got to throw a fiesta because they just survived against the Los Angeles Chargers. So enough with the Cowboys and their bitching and complaining. It is the Zach Gelb Show on CBS Sports Radio. We'll come on back. Davante Adams is frustrated. I don't think it's a matter of if he's going to get traded. I think it's now just a matter of when he's going to get traded by the time his contract expires at the end of the 2026 season. Sorry, Stu, but we will talk a little bit about your wide receiver and Davante Adams, who's not happy, when the Zach Gelb Show does continue from Miami after these short messages.
You're in a 5-minute break. Four minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Four minutes remaining. Three minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Three minutes remaining. Two minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Two minutes remaining. 1 minute, 30 seconds remaining. One minute remaining. .45 seconds remaining. .30 seconds remaining. .15 seconds. Break ends in 5 seconds.
He's live. He's nationwide on CBS Sports Radio.
The Cowboys actually have regressed from where they are the last 2 years. Because the last 2 times in a big playoff game against the San Francisco 49ers, those games were actually close. Those games came down to Dak Prescott not being able to get the ball in the end zone at the end of the game. That was a good old-fashioned ass whooping where the 49ers just destroyed the Dallas Cowboys.
This is the Zach Gelb Show. Here's your host, Zach Gelb.
And you could stream the NFL on Westwood One for free, sponsored by AutoZone. All season long, you could listen to every Westwood One broadcast of the NFL live on the NFL app by asking Alexa to open Westwood One Sports or on the Odyssey app. Get in the zone, AutoZone. The free AutoZone Fix Finder service can help you find a fix for free. Get in the zone, AutoZone. Restrictions apply. We will talk about Davante Adams in just a second, but we opened up the show discussing the sensitive drama Dallas choking Cowboys, who are using this week to voice their frustrations. 855-212-4CBS, 855-212-4227. Let's go to Bill in Pennsylvania first up on the Zach Gelb Show. Bill, what's happening? Good afternoon.
Hey, Zach. How you doing, man?
Doing fantastic. What do you got for me?
I've been a lifelong Cowboy fan. 61 years old, been watching them for about 53 years. I think Dak Prescott is well overrated. With the talent he's had the last couple of years, there's no reason why they shouldn't have been to a Super Bowl.
Yeah, you're not wrong, and thanks for the phone call, Bill. This is a team where if your quarterback just showed up the last 2 years in a playoff game, you would have, bare minimum, been to the divisional round 2 years ago. And then you would have been to the NFC title game last year. And that's why it's frustrating. Here's where the Cowboys come off as minor league. It's not as if we're saying, oh, the Cowboys suck. Oh, the Cowboys are a horrible team. Everyone just goes, yeah, they're the Cowboys. Like, we know what they are. They win games, but they don't win the big games. When they win a playoff game up against Tampa Bay, it's like, oh, we never defeated Tom Brady. That Bucs team was 8-9 last year. And they make that as if it's the biggest game of the world. And then the following week, when you go up against a legit opponent and a great opponent, you have parts of the team that show up. You have parts of the team that excel, like the defense did last year. And then offensively, Tony Pollard goes down in the game, and Dak didn't elevate his game. And a franchise quarterback like Dak Prescott, if he is supposed to be a franchise quarterback and he's getting paid like one of $40 million a year, needs to elevate his game. And I wasn't even asking him to be great in that game. If he was a game manager in that game, he would have won the football game. But he was putrid in the football game last year up against San Francisco. And I think the word overrated from Bill in Pennsylvania is the proper word. I don't get on the radio and go, oh, Dak Prescott's trash. Or I'm not like, what did LaShawn McCoy say? He's ass or garbage. I don't say that. I acknowledge that there's a lot of teams that would like Dak Prescott as their quarterback. I acknowledge that Dak Prescott is a good quarterback in this league. But when you look at quarterbacks that have won a Super Bowl the last 20 years, Brady, Mahomes, Breeze, you go through Peyton Manning, you look at the elite quarterbacks that win and consistently win, or just win one time like a Rodgers, Dak Prescott isn't on the level as those guys. And sure, you could tell me, oh, well, Brad Johnson won a Super Bowl. And Trent Dilfer, he won a Super Bowl. And Nick Foles won a Super Bowl. That Eagles team was loaded. The Buccaneers had an all-time great defense with Brad Johnson when he was their quarterback. And the same with Trent Dilfer and the Baltimore Ravens. You look at this Cowboys team, they have a really good defense. You could even say they have a great defense, but it's not an all-timer when you look at the defensive side of the ball. So those teams could win with lesser QB play because the rest of their team was at a different level. And the Cowboys have enough talent. The Cowboys are a good team, but when you ask Dak to go march him down the field in a big spot, he folds. And until he changes that, until he gets to, I'm not even going to say a Super Bowl, but until he gets to an NFC title game, people are going to say, yeah, I just don't expect Dak to get there. Like, that's how low the standards are. We're not even discussing the Cowboys as a team that we're like, okay, I expect them to get to the NFC title game. It's Philadelphia, it's San Francisco, and now the Lions are emerging as well. And just the national feel of it, I get it because we talk about the Cowboys so much. So the players are like, oh, no one believes in us. You're not wrong. But just because no one believes in you, there's different levels of belief. There's belief that you guys are a good team. There's belief you guys are a solid team. But a lot of that belief is just marinated in disappointment because it's the same thing over and over and over again where you're stuck on being a good team. And you've been stuck on being a good team for a while. And I'm sitting here saying, when do you go from being a good team to them being a great team up here? And the last 2 years, you haven't taken that step. And I'm sick of the excuses. Oh, Cowboys fans don't like McCarthy. McCarthy's been fine. You just changed the offensive coordinator. You got rid of Kellen Moore, who was overrated. You know, you brought in Brandon Cooks. You have Michael Gallup back. You have Tony Pollard. Defensively, you've done a good job with Dan Quinn being the defensive coordinator. It stinks that Trayvon Diggs is done for the season, but you have Stephon Gilmore. That's why you traded for him, to create that depth. You have Micah Parsons, one of the better players, not just defensive players, but one of the better players in the league, period. There's a lot of worse situations. There's a lot of situations where I look at the quarterback and I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure about the quarterback, and the team sucks around him. This team is good, but they never take that next step. And like Bill in Pennsylvania, to say that Dak, and he's a Cowboy fan, right? It's not me just saying this, who's not a Cowboy fan. That's a Cowboys fan. To say he's overrated, yeah, Micah Parsons and Mike McCarthy, you're trying to talk him up as something that just quite frankly, he is not. He is not great. And I will not call him great until he plays better in the playoffs and just for starters gets to an NFC title game. And then I get it. If you get to an NFC title game and you lose by 15 or you lose by 3, then you got to take that next step of getting to a Super Bowl and winning a Super Bowl. But windows are only open for so long. And the Cowboys window, I don't even know if it has an opening to get to a Super Bowl. Because year in and year out, they are there, but they don't go anywhere further than the wild card round of the divisional round. Let's hear from Davante Adams. So the Raiders win last week. The Raiders are 3-3, like a surprising 3-3. Where you go, really? The Raiders are 3-3? Now, you want to talk about a team that actually gets a lot of negative criticism, and it's warranted. That's the Las Vegas Raiders. Like, you even look at Stuart Kovacs, poor Stu back in our New York City studios. Stu, a few weeks ago, was like, the season's over. And now it's like, they're 3-3. They could be 4-3 after this weekend. Their record is a lot better than the way that they're playing on the field. But coming after a win, Davante Adams had like 2 catches in the game. And say what you want about Belichick. Belichick still has a way and a unique ability when he games plans to take away the best weapon of the other team. And when you look at the Raiders, yeah, I love Josh Jacobs, but they're their best weapon is Davante Adams. And they did a kick-ass job, the Patriots, up against Davante Adams, and they still weren't able to win the game because the Patriots don't have any resemblance of an offense in the year of 2023. So if he would have voiced these frustrations, Davante Adams, after a loss, I think you would look at it and say, yeah, I totally get it. Now, I do believe it's split where people say, sure, they have to get the ball more to Davante Adams, so there's still a lack of trust with Josh McDaniels. But I do think a lot of people look at it and say, the Raiders won. Like, there is timing to voice your frustrations when this team is now 3-3 with the chance to be 4-3 after this weekend. Let's not voice those frustrations right now, but I'll let you be the judge. Here is Davante Adams, and then we'll have a quick conversation about this.
I mean, I'm a human being, and I have extremely high standards for myself and this offense. So, to me, it's not just about, I'm sure people thinking like, well, they won the game, they won the Packers game, why is there an issue? I mean, you see why it's an issue. Y'all should know who I am, know what I'm about at this point. My benchmark is not wins and losses, it's greatness. So, came here to win and to do it the right way.
So, Stu, since you're the Raiders fan here, let me ask you about this, because this is a football team that they are starting. I don't want to say they're getting it together, because they're not. But the last 2 weeks, they beat the Packers and they beat the Patriots. Where are you at right now with Davante Adams after hearing those comments when it comes in a rare time when the Raiders, this is now a win streak, Stu. Back-to-back games is now a win streak for your football team. How do you kind of react to it?
Yeah, it's a rarity, a win streak, a very rare win streak for the Raiders. Yeah, it's frustrating. I mean, they're winning and he's complaining. I get if they were losing. I get if they were, 1-6 right now or 1-5. I'd understand that because, yes, getting the ball to Adams is their best route of winning. But if they're winning, whether he's catching 15 passes or one pass, they're winning. They have wins. They have 3 wins on the season, which is fine and probably more than I expected. So for him to complain, it's ridiculous. And if he cares more about, getting the catches than having wins, then I think maybe it's time to move on from Adams.
So that's interesting that you want to go as far as say maybe it's time to move on from Davante Adams, especially because the Raiders don't usually have a leg to stand on when you have some talent, and you should be fortunate that the Raiders do have a player like Davante Adams. The thing I will look at and say this, a part of me goes the timing is the wrong timing, because as everything Stu just said, Stu is kind of immune right now, and he is kind of numb to any Raiders pain or any Raiders drama, because this is what the Raiders have done his entire life. But for it to be coming when the team, I don't want to say is heading in the right direction, because I don't think they are, but when this team is finally stacking back-to-back wins, I understand why Stu is frustrated, where it's everyone take care of this stuff behind the scenes and don't have drama when drama isn't needed. But with that being said, Stu, and you even kind of said it as well, if the Raiders want to continue winning, they got to make sure that Davante Adams gets more than 2 catches, and he needs to get the ball more than he did up against the New England Patriots moving forward against other teams, because if you're not getting Davante Adams 8, 9, 10 catches a game, I just don't know how many wins you could get with a defense that's very suspect, and then an offense that has some skill position players. When you look at Jacobs, you look at Davante Adams, but there's not consistency with that offense week in and week out. Yeah, and they're in the easy part of their schedule. I mean, they just played the Packers and Patriots, and now they have the Bears without Justin Fields most likely. Yeah. And then they'll have the Jets and Giants coming up in a few weeks, and then it gets tougher. That's when we'll see the true Raiders come out, I'm sure. But yeah, it's just for them to be actually winning these games and for him to be complaining, it's just, for me, it's so bizarre. I guess maybe it's a message to McDaniels that maybe he sees it coming, like he wants more targets because he knows if they don't start getting him the ball, he's going to start losing and they're going to start losing. But I don't know. I'm just not a fan of it. Well, how much do you think the Derek Carr part of this still factors in? Oh, because probably, yeah. Because this offseason, all right, he voiced his frustration, and then he tried to put the toothpaste back in the tube when he started to say, oh, I'm good with David Ziegler, I'm good with Josh McDaniels. And it was like, that's not what you basically just said. And you were taking shots at this regime, which it's fair to take shots at this regime. I don't think this regime is all that good. But now to do this when you're winning, it does feel as if you start to see those emotions from the summer. And that's why I said right before the break, I don't think this is a conversation of if he gets traded before that contract expires and, he's a free agent in 2027. I just believe that it's a matter of when. I would be shocked if they trade him in season. but I could see this getting ugly after this season. And I do believe that Ziegler and McDaniels, for some reason, still will be back because Mark Davis is cheap and he just had to pay that buyout for John Gruden with the whole settlement and all that. So I kind of feel as if they will give him another opportunity in Josh McDaniels and David Ziegler to get the job done with the Raiders, and then they'll fail miserably next year. And it would not surprise me whatsoever if, this offseason that they trade Davante Adams. And if that's the case, it's like, why are you keeping McDaniels? Just blow the entire thing up because you're running out a very talented player. And I thought of a few teams. The Jets, they'll come calling, especially who their quarterback will be next year. I don't think he's coming back this year, but he believes he will be. But with that connection of Rodgers and Adams, that the Jets will get a lot of pressure from their quarterback and Aaron Rodgers if Adams becomes available to get the deal done. A team like the Lions, I know they have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's excellent, and they have Jamison Williams, who's promising, but you're Detroit. You have an opportunity to pounce here. You need to do so. And then I'll toss out three other teams. And actually, I got to give credit to Willie Colon, who said this last week when he joined us on Friday. He suggested the Kansas City Chiefs. I do believe the price is going to have to go up if you're trading inside the AFC West. But could you imagine if the rich get richer with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, and they could go out and acquire someone like Davante Adams? And then finally, the Ravens and the Bills, who would need both those players. The Ravens don't have a legit number one wide receiver. Maybe Zay Flowers could turn into that. Odell Beckham Jr. is just not healthy enough to be that in the year of 2023 anymore. And it would be nice to see Lamar Jackson with a actual bona fide number one elite wide receiver in the NFL. And that final team of the Buffalo Bills, I don't know where the relationship's going to continue to be with Stephon Diggs. In an ideal world, you would want Diggs and Davante Adams together. And Gabe Davis is a really good player who at times looks like he could be a strong number two. But if you could bump Gabe Davis to the 3 wide receiver and have Adams and also Diggs be your 1-2 punch with Kincaid as a tight end, if he takes that step, Dawson Knox as well. You got James Cook coming out of the backfield. That could extend this window for the Buffalo Bills and maybe take them to heights that they've never been to in a long time or maybe ever before, where we all acknowledge that this Buffalo Bills team is a very good team and at times looks like they're going to be a great team, but they've been stuck on a team that has not been able to get to the Super Bowl and hoist that franchise's first ever Lombardi trophy. So those are 5 destinations that I thought of when Davante Adams gets traded. And I do believe that could come as soon as the offseason. I'd be surprised if it's midseason, just with a few weeks until the trade deadline. All righty, this is Zach Gelb Show on CBS Sports Radio. We'll come on back. More allegations against Jim Harbaugh and Michigan. We'll discuss what that means for the coaching future of Jim Harbaugh. But first up, standing by with our latest CBS Sports Radio's update back in our New York City studios, here is the Act Man, Rich Ackerman.
CBS Sports Radio. Sports Flash.
Oh, the Jaguars have a chance to pull away from a weak AFC South this week. They open Week 7 of the season in New Orleans, looking for their 4th straight win and to potentially open a 2-game lead in the division. Head coach Doug Peterson, everything's clicking right now.
Their confidence is extremely high right now. I see this team playing better together. We're playing better complementary football in all 3 phases, especially the last couple of weeks.
Trevor Lawrence is expected to start despite a knee injury. The Saints come in at 3-3. It'll be the battle of the backups when the Raiders meet the Bears, with Jimmy Garoppolo now ruled out with a back injury. Deshaun Watson practiced today for the first time in nearly a month. He's been dealing with a rotator cuff injury. The NCAA investing Michigan for alleged sign stealing. According to reports, the Wolverines had people at games of future playoff opponents scouting, trying to pick up signs. The Astros try to even up the American League Championship Series today in the first of 2 playoff games, while tonight, Game 3 of the NLCS in Arizona, where the Diamondbacks try to get back into the series after dropping the first 2 in Philly. I'm Rich Ackerman.
CBS Sports Radio is everywhere, at home, in your car, and of course on your phone and tablet. Find us on your local affiliate, SiriusXM Channel 158, or the free Odyssey app.
CBS Sports Radio.
You're in a 5-minute break. 4 minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Four minutes remaining. Three minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Three minutes remaining. Two minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Two minutes remaining. 1 minute, 30 seconds remaining. One minute remaining. Five seconds remaining. Seconds remaining. Fifteen seconds. Break ends in 5 seconds.
He's live. He's nationwide on CBS Sports Radio. This is the Zach Gelb Show.
Now joining me is the Pro Football Hall of Famer, the two-time Super Bowl champion,
and the new head coach at Jackson State. And that, of course, he needs no introduction, really. Primetime, Deion Sanders. Deion, how you been?
Zach, I love how we just having a casual conversation, and you went to that radio voice. It was beautiful, man. You're awesome. You're awesome already. You're my dude already, man. I appreciate you.
Well, you know this, and I know this. When the lights shine brightest, primetime players got to show up, right?
Hey, you showed up, baby. You showed up, Zach.
Here's your host, Zach Gelb.
All righty, we continue. It is the Zach Gelb Show on CBS Sports Radio. In Miami for today and tomorrow. Be back in studio Sunday for Eye on Football, and then back in NYC for our Monday edition of the Zach Gelb Show. Got a good meal lined up tonight. Going to one of my all-time favorite restaurants, and that is Joe's Stone Crab right after the show. So going to have some stone crabs, some of the best. It's like $11 or $12 fried chicken that you're ever going to have. Get the lobster mac and cheese, the hash brown as well. Go through it all and then end the meal off with, they have like a fudge brownie sundae and also a key lime pie. So I'll be eating like a fat pig tonight, coming up at about 7:30 at Joe's Stone Crab, one of my favorite spots in Miami. And I actually, the last time I was there, or maybe it was the second to last time I was there, it was right before the pandemic started. And Samter, help me out here. Who is the politician in California that became a big face during COVID? I forget. It looks like a movie star. I forget who his name was. Gavin Newsom, it was. And I'm sitting there. It was right before the 49ers Super Bowl where they lost to Kansas City. And I was sitting, and there was a man table over to me. It was Gavin Newsom. And everyone is going up to this guy as if he was the biggest deal on the planet. And I'm sitting there with a few buddies, and I go, who the heck is this guy? I legitimately thought he was a movie star. So eventually I had some guts to say to the table over next to me, who was the person that you're sitting next to? And they go, oh, that's he's the governor, I believe it is, of California, in Gavin Newsom. And I go, who would give a rat's ass about a politician? Like, who would want to take a picture with the politician when they're at a meal? For the amount of people that were stopping him and shaking hands with him and getting selfies and photos with him, I thought this was going to be an A-list celebrity, not Gavin Newsom of all people. And then 2 months later, he became the face of the world, or a month later became one of the faces of the world. And I'm like, oh, I had dinner next to that guy about 30 to 40 days before the world did all start to shut down and go crazy back in 2020. So we'll see who I run into tonight. Baba Booey stopped me, and I worked at Sirius for a little bit, and he thought I looked like John Hines' brother. Let's just say the Stern crew could have been a little bit intoxicated at that meal. I personally don't see the resemblance to John Hine, but they thought I looked like John Hine, and I've met Baba Booey before. Very nice guy. So I'll tell you if I get into any trouble tonight, if there's any good stories at dinner. Anyway, talking about a little trouble, let's go to Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines. So they already have a self-imposed suspension of Jim Harbaugh. That's why he was out for the first 3 games of the season, because of recruiting violations that he was not honest about. And now they're trying to, I don't want to say drop the hammer against Jim Harbaugh, but because he's not genuflecting to the NCAA and the Committee of Infractions, they're after Jim Harbaugh. But this latest report is something totally different. And I was reading it via Yahoo today that the NCAA is investigating the Michigan football program for allegedly violating rules that prohibit teams from scouting in-person future opponents, industry sources told Yahoo Sports. So sign stealing during the game isn't illegal unless you are doing so electronically. But according to the NCAA rules, from what I'm reading, is that you can't have someone scouting another team's game and picking up their signs from that. That makes it illegal. But you could, I guess, have scouts go and do their job of actually scouting games. So this does feel as it's a little Spygate-like, where it's going to be made to be a bigger deal than what it actually is. And I'm not going to sit here and get through all the details of this report and kind of bore everybody to death. But this will make me double down on my point that I said before the season with Jim Harbaugh, that I believe this will be Jim Harbaugh's final season at Michigan, because he's clearly fed up. And I know there's some reports that there could be a contract extension coming sooner rather than later. I don't really believe that. I understand why Michigan would want to get this done. But you have him fighting with the NCAA now. He had to miss 3 games this year against 3 cupcake schools, so whatever. There's going to be a further suspension, and now you have these allegations of sign stealing and sending people out to scout future opponents and all this nonsense. If I'm Jim Harbaugh, I'm just saying, yeah, I'm done. Like, Michigan, I love you. Michigan, you're my school. Michigan, I want to win here, and I want to consistently win here. But with all these issues with the NCAA, Jim Harbaugh has to be wanted by at least 1 or 2 teams in the NFL. Like the Chargers, they should want Jim Harbaugh. The Commanders should want Jim Harbaugh. So Jim Harbaugh shouldn't sit back and go, yeah, I'm just going to play nice because I like Michigan and I love Michigan and this is my school, this is my alma mater. Eventually, he'll have a backbone and he's going to leave. And I'm not saying that he's totally exonerated. I'm not saying he's totally in the right here. But a lot of this stuff seems trivial. A lot of this stuff seems like minuscule infractions in the large scheme of things, not really that big of a deal. And I wouldn't want to put up with this investigation and all this crap that's going to come his way. I don't know if this is true, but I was reading it. Michigan State was contemplating not playing in their game this weekend when they were notified because of this. I know Michigan State sucks right now, and Mel Tucker, and for other reasons, and that's a completely different story, Mel Tucker is out of a job, and he could only, he's the reason why he's out of that job right now, but the performance was bad at Michigan State to begin with. That would have been so ridiculous of Michigan State if they're like, oh, I'm apprehensive of playing Michigan because they may have scouted us before the game and sent someone out there to take our signs. The whole thing's just absurd. And, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of Jim Harbaugh. And maybe there's going to be more games tacked on and there'll be another suspension because this is a totally different thing. If I'm Jim, I'm out. I'm like, this is my last year at Michigan. You don't have to say that publicly. And there has to be some desire and some itch there to go back to the NFL, where in 4 years as the head coach of the 49ers, he went to 3 NFC title games, went to a Super Bowl, and now his Michigan legacy as a coach is in a pretty damn good spot where you have 2 college football playoff appearances, going to have a 3rd this year. You have 2 Big Ten championships, probably going to have a 3rd this year. And, yeah, now you got to take it the next step. Or else you start to become the Dallas Cowboys where it's like, all right, you're stuck on one spot. So for Jim Harbaugh, you got to go win a national championship this year. But if you don't win a national championship this year, I don't think it means you have to come back. You could walk away from Michigan and be happy with what you did during your tenure as the head coach. And even if some of this stuff may be your fault, being Jim, I would leave. I'd go back to the NFL, but a team has to offer him a job because 2 years ago, he interviewed for that Vikings job for 11, 12 hours, didn't get it. Last year, it seemed like he was imploring teams for jobs, and no one took a flyer on Jim Harbaugh. So maybe my view of this, of Jim Harbaugh being likely of winding back up into the NFL, is not realistic. But I got to think just those 2 teams, the Commanders, and I know the Chargers are cheap, they got to be interested, in my opinion. And how much longer, if you're Jim, do you want to put up with the sideshow and the antics of the NCAA?
You're in a 5-minute break. Four minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Four minutes remaining. 3 minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Three minutes remaining. Two minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Two minutes remaining. One minute, 30 seconds remaining. One minute remaining. Forty-five seconds remaining. Seconds remaining. Fifteen seconds. Break ends in 5 seconds.
He's live. He's nationwide on CBS Sports Radio. This is the Zach Gelb Show.
We continue. It is the Zach Gelb Show, coast to coast on CBS Sports Radio. Hour number 2 of our radio program. Christian Hackenberg is going to stop by coming up 20 minutes from now, as we'll discuss Penn State's big game this weekend against Ohio State and another crazy weekend of college football. So Kyler Murray is now activated from the PUP list. That's a 21-day window where they now have to activate him to the roster. And if they don't, then he's going to be out for the season with the Arizona Cardinals. But what I will say with Kyler Murray is before the season, I think everyone believed that he'll probably would not come back until December. Probably mid-November, the earliest. Like, he's not going to play in their next game. Is he going to play 2 weeks from now? 3 weeks from now? Like, he needs to play from 3 weeks from now, at least be moved on to the active roster. But it seems as if he is inching closer and closer to that return, with him coming the list that he was on, and now can start to create that window for him to get back on to a football field. But the thought process of, is he their long-term guy now, I think has become very fascinating, because Kyler Murray is a good quarterback. But as we've talked about with Dak, I don't think Kyler Murray is a very good quarterback or a great quarterback. And he is paid this enormous amount of money to be the franchise guy with the Arizona Cardinals. And I don't think he is going to be a franchise quarterback in this league. But we're not that far away from him being a quarterback that was a playoff team, double-digit win games, and then you had the disaster coaching of Cliff Kingsbury, Steve Keim being an overrated general manager, and now you have this new regime that doesn't owe him anything outside of the contract that the organization has already guaranteed him. But what I mean by they don't owe him anything, they didn't draft him. Monty Ossenfort wasn't a part of this Cardinals regime when they elected to make Kyler Murray the number 1 overall pick. Jonathan Gannon was not on this coaching staff, and I don't know what Gannon's going to be as a head coach. But so far, to start off his tenure with not a lot of talent, this is a coach that at least has his team in games, and they're giving gritty efforts week in and week out, and they're still losing. For Cardinals fans, that's like the best thing that could happen, because you want to get the best draft pick possible. You also have the Houston Texans draft pick because of the Will Anderson trade, where Arizona fell back from 3 and they traded that pick to the Texans, and the Texans climbed back up from, 11 or 12 or something like that in the draft. So now the Texans are a team that you thought for sure that would be a top 5 pick. The Houston Texans, they've done a nice job this year with their new coach in DeMeco Ryans, and also C.J. Stroud, by far and away being the best rookie quarterback from what we've seen so far through the first 6 weeks of the season, with Bryce Young having basically nothing in Carolina. And now Anthony Richardson's going to be out for the year with that shoulder surgery that he's getting. So for the Cardinals, I don't think you just move on from Kyler Murray this year just for the sake of moving on. You have to have a quarterback and identify a quarterback that is going to be your franchise quarterback, or hopefully be your franchise quarterback for the next 5 to 10 years, bare minimum, or anywhere in that range where you feel good about giving that quarterback a second contract, where look how quickly this narrative has flipped on Kyler Murray, where a lot of people at the time weren't even on board with giving him that extension. Keim and Kingsbury, they give him that extension, and Michael Bidwell did, because remember, they originally extended Keim and Kingsbury, and then a year later, Keim and Kingsbury, out of a job, and then you have Kyler Murray, who's still on this team, but tore his ACL at the end of the season, and now we don't know his future. So it's all about where the Cardinals draft pick is going to be. Like, if the Cardinals, and they're going to continue to be bad this year, but if they win another game or two and they're not number 1 overall, you could forget about Caleb Williams then, and then it becomes how they evaluate with Monty Ossenfort a Drake Maye, a Shedeur Sanders, if he forgoes his next season with Colorado, Michael Penix Jr., right now the odds-on favorite to win the Heisman Trophy, and whatever other name that they do gather and they do scout, where they go, okay, I don't only just like this guy, I don't only just think this guy could be a good quarterback, but I think this quarterback could be a great quarterback, and I think this quarterback could be an elite quarterback. So that is the big question for the Arizona Cardinals, where they may like Kyler Murray, but it's clear this regime isn't in love with Kyler Murray. And they have their eyes wandering in other directions. And yes, they're in a relationship, but you know that they have 1 foot in, 1 foot out the door with Kyler Murray. It just comes down to where they're going to be in the draft. And also, Kyler Murray, when you get back onto the field, how do you play? Because right now, the Cardinals, with not a lot of talent, they've been in games. And getting Kyler Murray back should increase your win total. So when he plays, even if it only increases their win total by a game or two this season, Kyler Murray in some capacity is going to be a positive for this football team. And that could disrupt their goal of maybe getting their next franchise quarterback. But we're going to find out really what Kyler Murray is made out of, because he's not in an ideal situation in Arizona. He's not in a situation right now where you should expect him to put up big numbers and really ooh and ah and wow people and make people impressed with his play. So if he's able to do that, good on him and good on Kyler Murray. And we also got to remember that Kyler Murray is coming off an ACL injury. And we usually see with quarterbacks coming off an ACL injury, it's not until a full season the next year where they go back to being the player that they were. And what I mean by that is Kyler Murray's back soon. Kyler Murray's going to be playing soon. But there's a difference in Kyler Murray being on the field playing and then Kyler Murray being back. And for Kyler Murray being back, I think a lot of it is upstairs. I think a lot of it is mentally, where you have to overcome thinking about the injury. You have to go through getting hit once again. And a lot of times with an ACL injury, like I look back to when Tom Brady came back from that ACL injury, like he was a good quarterback, no doubt about it, in 2009 after recovering from the 2008 ACL injury with Bernard Pollard up against the Kansas City Chiefs, but he didn't get back into Tom Brady form until 2010. And that's coming from, right, the greatest quarterback of all time. It even took him time in adjusting, and it took him time to getting back into the level that we expected Tom Brady to be at. So for Kyler Murray, it's a similar thing. And the unfortunate part for him, and it's because of the way that he played towards the end and the lack of maturity and the lack of conviction that he provided for the franchise with the bad study habits and all that. And gave him the extension, but then you put that dumb clause in his contract. And it's like, why would you even give him that extension where you're auditioning with a new regime, with a new group to show that you're worthy of sticking around with this team with a contract that's off a brand new extension too. And it's going to be the two factors of how does Kyler control what he could control? And the other part of it as well is where are the Cardinals picking in the draft? Because if that Texans team, I'm not going to say go on a playoff run, but if that Texans team wins like 7 or 8 games this year, you're probably not picking in the top 10 from that Texans pick. And if Murray comes back and plays well, not even great, not even good, just well, you may be out of the top 5. And if they don't fall in love with a great quarterback in their eyes, then there's no need to take a quarterback. Because organizations that just take a quarterback because they need a quarterback are the ones that get it wrong. You got to go through the extensive scouting process, and you got to have no doubts, leave no stone unturned, and walk away saying, wow, we know that this guy is going to be the guy for the franchise. And for the Cardinals, you do have time. Like, the contract is not easy to move off of. And you have a new regime in where you never know how long that regime is going to get a shot. But the Cardinals are taking over, and they're building from the bottom up, this new regime. And the way I look at the Cardinals, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of Gannon, and he's impressed me so far, and I'm not the, Monty Ossenfort, I had no feel on him, is that this team, year one is a wash. And so far, they've impressed more than they disappointed, even though the record would indicate that. But just with the performances, then year 2, you got to get better. And then by year 3, you got to go into that year thinking, okay, this is a playoff caliber team. And this is a team that should be expected to make the playoffs. Whether Kyler Murray is a part of that or is somewhere else is still yet to be determined. But for Kyler Murray, when you get back and when you finally get activated to play, this is a job audition now. Because, yes, you're getting your money. Yes, you have a contract with the Arizona Cardinals where you would not be an unrestricted free agent until 2029, until after that 2028 season. But it doesn't mean that you are definitely going to be the Cardinals guy. Like, there was a time where Jared Goff got an extension with the Rams, or Carson Wentz got an extension with the Philadelphia Eagles. Goff now playing well with the Lions. Carson Wentz is shooting like ducks somewhere, probably in North Dakota or wherever he's living. And he's hunting and posting photos with like dead bears and dead deer and all that, because no one's giving Carson Wentz an opportunity because he's played himself out of the league. So just because you get the extension and the team may think they're giving the extension to their guy doesn't mean you are their guy. And there's no more loyalties in Arizona outside of the contract that they owe him. And who knows how much longer Michael Bidwell is going to be an owner to Kyler Murray. And Monty Ossenfort, he doesn't need Kyler Murray. Jonathan Gannon doesn't need Kyler Murray. It'd be nice in an ideal world where if those two guys could have Kyler Murray be their guy and Kyler Murray could change and turn around the conversation about him and be the player that he's capable of being. But if they don't see that soon, if they don't see signs of that, and oh yeah, by the way, the draft picks fall, where even if the Cardinals aren't on their own as bad of a team as we may think, or the Texans pick doesn't turn out to be that great, you could use those two picks to trade up in the draft to go get your guy too. That's the other part. When you look at it, and maybe there's a team picking in the top 5 that says, yeah, we're not in love with a quarterback, or we're not going to take a quarterback. But right now in the sport, everyone's chasing for the services of Caleb Williams. Drake Maye is also a very hot name right now in NFL circles for future franchise quarterbacks. Now, a lot of these other guys, it is conversation, but I don't know how they're going to be viewed as well. So for Kyler Murray, it's kind of put up or shut up time, and we're going to have to wait and see what he turns out to be in this sample size. And if they have the draft pick at the end of the year and they don't feel like he's their guy, then they're going to draft a quarterback and they'll move on from Kyler Murray. But that conversation is going to be a fascinating one. And for Kyler Murray, control what you can control on a football field. But then also it depends where your team is picking. Because if they're in range to strike and pull the trigger on a Caleb Williams or a Drake Maye, they're going to do it, and they're going to reset the organization. They'll get what they can get for Kyler Murray in a draft pick and, in trade, and he will be someone that teams will be interested in. And then you'll find a way to figure out the dead cap, but also you have a rookie contract coming in with the new quarterback, so you could afford for the dead cap not to be in a great spot with the Arizona Cardinals as it pertains to Kyler Murray. All righty, let's take a break here on the Zach Gelb Show on CBS Sports Radio. When we return, one of my favorites will join us to preview the Penn State, Ohio State, the former quarterback of the Penn State Nittany Lions, where when I was back in college, I never thought I'd be saying on a national radio show that Christian Hackenberg was one of my favorites, just being a Temple guy. But I always enjoy our conversations now with Christian Hackenberg, so we'll chat up some college football when the Zach Gelb Show returns after these short messages.
You're in a 5-minute break. Four minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Four minutes remaining. Three minutes, 30 seconds remaining. 3 minutes remaining. Two minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Two minutes remaining. One minute, 30 seconds remaining. One minute remaining. .45 seconds remaining. .30 seconds remaining. .15 seconds. Break ends in 5 seconds.
Now back to the Zach Gelb Show.
Alrighty, rocking and rolling. It is the Zach Gelb Show, coast to coast on CBS Sports Radio. Huge game this weekend in college football between Penn State and Ohio State, two top 10 teams inside the Big Ten. And now joining us is the former Penn State quarterback in Christian Hackenberg. Christian, always great to have you on. How you been, my man?
Yeah, Zach, appreciate you. Appreciate the invite again, and hanging in there, doing good. Excited about this weekend as well.
So where's the confidence level with this Penn State team? We know they're a good team. Franklin struggled ever since getting to Penn State, defeating those top 10 teams, being 3-15. The confidence level of Christian Hackenberg as Penn State goes to Ohio State this weekend is what?
I feel it's extremely high, and mainly due to the depth in this roster. And it took a little bit of time for Coach Franklin to dig it out from the post-sanction era where we had the limitations and stuff like that. But, when you look at it on paper, I don't think Ohio State really has the advantage that they've had in the past. And that's a great thing because ultimately, these games come down to the Jimmies and Joes. So for him, I think he has a lot less to focus on outside of just coaching the games. So I'm really excited to see his approach and the offensive staff's approach in particular. I think the defense knows who they are and what they want to be, but going to be really excited to see what tricks they are going to pull out of that bag there.
It's fascinating to me because I do believe that a lot more people will say the pressure's on Penn State because they're trying to show that they're a national championship contending team. But you look at Ohio State, there's vulnerabilities with this team, and their best win of the season was Notre Dame. And quite frankly, I thought Notre Dame was the better team. They just couldn't catch an interception at the end and get 11 guys on the field.
Yeah, no, I see that point. And for me, though, just being a Penn State homer and for the aforementioned record against, top 10 opponents for Coach Franklin, I would argue that outside of just Penn State, I think for Coach Franklin, this is arguably the biggest game of his career. I know he's won a Big Ten championship. I know he's got over the hump, but just in terms of his plan and developing the roster, developing the depth and creating an identity, he's there now. So for him, he's got to show that he can go out there and wrestle with the big dogs on a consistent basis. So, I do see Ohio State's side of it, but realistically speaking, I think for Penn State, it's about getting over that hump and not only doing it once or twice or by a luck of a block field goal or something like that, or not luck, but by fortune of a block field goal. But because you go out there and you outplay him.
Is the Penn State fan confident with Franklin?
I would say so. And like I said, I just think people undervalue how difficult it was to dig out of those sanctions that were levied on the program just from a roster development standpoint. I obviously had to deal with that as a player when I was up there and the rest of the guys on the team. And it takes time. And especially now in today's world with the transfer portal and stuff like that, you can make those things happen faster, but Coach Franklin really had to do it prior to that. And now, you're seeing it come to fruition. So ultimately, I think the Penn State fans are confident because he's been able to do that and he's gotten over the humps. But now I think less about the fan base and more about the administration, Pat Kraft coming in there and stuff like that. That's who he's really got to continue to impress. And, again, like I said, the sanctions are 10 years. And he's there, so it's showtime for him, and I'm excited. I think he's mentally ready. I think he's grown a lot as a coach and as an orchestrator of the program and an overseer of the program. But I think that's really what he needs to continue to work towards is showing for the administration.
Talking to Christian Hackenberg right now, there was a lot of hype with Drew Aller at times last year. A lot of Penn State fans wanted to see him over Sean Clifford, and Sean did a good job last year, and that team did win the Rose Bowl. But now with what you've seen so far out of Drew being the guy, being the starting quarterback, kind of give me your view on the new Penn State quarterback.
Yeah, I think they've done a really good job with him, and I've talked about this. Everyone wants to see the flair and the big shots and all the talent that he has, but there is a mastery in his ability to facilitate in that 25 to low short yardage completion plays. He's very, very efficient. And then just from a decision-making standpoint, you don't see him really holding on to the ball too long. A guy who hasn't played much ball and is relatively young from an age standpoint. That's something that pro guys struggle with. And he's done it really well. And I think it's a lot easier to teach someone how to start seeing the opportunities and the shots down the field and stuff like that, as opposed to trying to pull back the reins and say, hey man, start thinking about being efficient, take the checkdowns. So really he's starting from a good spot there. And, I've just been super impressed with that. And I think the other stuff will come. And I think he's done a good job. Sean's a hard guy to follow up. He's been up there for, 7 years or whatever the heck it was, a lot of consistency. And I think for him, got a great running game. He doesn't have to go out there and win it himself until this weekend. I really do think it's going to come down to 2 or 3 plays by either him or McCord is who's going to decide this game. So I'm excited for him for that opportunity, but really impressed with his development and how he's continued to just grow and learn and, low key, how he talks to the media, just the whole package.
The ceiling for Kyle McCord, the Ohio State quarterback, as we're talking to Christian Hackenberg right now, is what?
Yeah, no, I think he's a really, really good player. From a fundamental standpoint, a technique standpoint, I really like some things that he does. And I think for Ohio State, it's strange when you don't have the overall explosiveness that they're so used to. And I think it's very easy to point the finger at the quarterback. But I think there's a lot of things that factor into that. They've been banged up. The running game's not as strong. The offensive line's, I don't think, as strong as it used to be, as it traditionally has been. So he's stepping into a different situation than his predecessors, but I do really like the kid's game. Ceiling wise, I don't know. It's the position is so dependent. I've said this to you before, and I think a lot of other folks. It's so dependent on what's around you.
Yeah.
But he does have a good base, and I think Ryan Day's doing a good job of figuring out what he does well, and that takes time as well. So,
Christian Hackenberg here with us. So we've seen Michigan, right, own Ohio State the last 2 years, and the way they did that was kind of bully ball, beat the snot out of you inside the trenches, hit on those big plays. We know how good Penn State's offensive line can be. We know that Penn State has explosive, big play ability, but they got to be more consistent with it. Going into this game, do you kind of feel as if Penn State and Michigan in terms of style are similar, and that gives an advantage to Penn State going up against Ohio State?
yeah, I mean, I've said that in the past. I think this Penn State team mirrors a lot more of that like old school physical football, not just Michigan, but I mean, they possess the football. They don't turn it over, and they run the ball at an efficient clip. Now, the explosive and all that stuff, like I said, I think that stuff can come, and they have the roster and the athletes to be able to get those, and it'll start happening. But yeah, I think defensively, they built their defensive roster and personnel to be able to run sideline to sideline with those other teams that are getting athletes. And I think that they've shored up some things on the inside. So overall matchup wise, like, yes, I think Penn State has done a great job of grasping that old school mentality of we're going to impose our will. And then we're also going to augment that with athletes that when you get them the ball in space can make stuff happen. So, I'm really curious to see how it shakes out against a top 10 opponent, top 5 opponent, because we haven't seen that yet, but at least this year. So it is intriguing, and it is kind of funny to study on how those 3 programs in particular have developed over really the last 4 or 5 years.
Wrap it up with Christian Hackenberg. So Michigan in the news today. We know before the season there was the recruiting problems with Jim Harbaugh. The self-imposed 3-game suspension. I thought going into this season, this would be his final year at Michigan. He'd just say, bleep all this nonsense. I'm going back to the NFL. Now there's sign-stealing allegations, and they're sending people to go scout other opponents. Like, I kind of roll my eyes at a lot of this stuff, but the rules are what the rules are. Do you feel as if this will be it for Harbaugh at Michigan? He'll just say, I'm not dealing with the NCAA and go back to the pros.
It'll be really interesting. I also think Jim's had so much success, and it's one of those things where if I was in his shoes at my alma mater, see, especially with the team they have this year, like, see how it plays out. If you do what you need to do and you get over the hump, no better way to say sayonara, just ride off in the sunset than at your home place. But if he's still got the fire, which I would assume he probably still does, and depending on how it all shakes out, I don't see that being something that I would not expect is if the right opportunity presented itself. But I don't think he's just going to jump ship haphazardly because of this. I think he can continue to deal with it. And I think he really wants to, if he does make that move, be a competitor, and at least an immediate competitor for championship Super Bowl type of teams and organizations. So I know that's tough to find, but they do arise. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm not sold that it's Michigan. I don't think he's going to be the guy at Michigan in 5 years. I'll put it at that. Like, I think that the sun is setting on that chapter.
So we've talked about Dabo Swinney before via text message, and I voiced my frustration with Dabo Swinney to you about 2-3 weeks ago with the arrogance and the name, image, and likeness comments and not embracing the transfer portal. The other day, and I'm sure you've seen the comments, he's like going after the fans where everyone was on the bandwagon a few years ago, and now maybe we should lose more games and people would jump off the bandwagon. Just what an arrogant SOB this guy is. It's like, you love when people are praising you when you're winning, but because you built a great standard and people are finally starting to hold you accountable to that standard, now you're just whining and just being absolutely ridiculous for Dabo Swinney.
It's strange, and I did see your rant on that as well. So you put 2 Hall of Fame caliber rants together on Dabo. But it is just strange to me that that's the approach that he would take. It's just his background. He Saban coaching tree. Like, I think it should just be the standard. And it's a fall of a dynasty down there, in my opinion. It was funny. I was telling my little brother, he's like, we were so used to just leave. He played baseball down there. He's like, we would leave at halftime. And now it's like they're in dog fights, but they still have the same type of talent, same type of recruiting classes. So I just think There's some deep soul searching that goes on, but I really do think that ship has also passed down there in Clemson.
So everyone talks so positively about Caleb Williams, and deservedly so, with what he does on a football field. A lot of people know how good Drake Maye is, but do you think there's a chance that maybe Drake Maye usurps Caleb Williams and we actually see Drake Maye be the number 1 overall pick?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to be really tough, just because of the media pressure. I think you saw a little bit of that even this past year with CJ and Bryce Young. I said it before. I think when you're talking about those types of players, it's 1A, 1B, 1C. And really what it comes down to is fit culturally, in the locker room, in the city. Like when you draft someone there, that person is supposed to be the face of that program for the next 10 to 15 years, or organization for the next 10 to 15 years. So with those two players in particular, I think slightly different body types, things of that nature, but games are pretty similar when it comes to throwing the football. They're both facilitators. They both push it down the field. They both create with their legs. And I think ultimately it's going to come down to fit, but Caleb just has so much juice behind him. And honestly, I from a Heisman standpoint, like best player on the team, MVP, I think the Notre Dame game, the loss, is actually a more glaring point as to why and how valuable Caleb Williams is to USC. If he does not play well, that is a subpar football team. When he's playing well, they can go out and compete with anybody. So I think that's really intriguing. And I think a testament to his talents, but I think the better situation would be Drake just playing that second fiddle, seeing what happens, read and react. He might land in a better situation for it.
So Alabama, Tennessee this weekend. Alabama already has 1 loss. I think a second loss will eventually come at some point this year, and they won't be in the college football playoff. But they only have 1 loss right now. They're starting to get some more wins. People are like, it is Alabama. Are you buying back in on the Crimson Tide, or did they show their true colors earlier this season?
No, I think that they're at a loss just due to the fact that their identity for the past 5 years has been kind of stripped from them. I think Milroe presents some issues from a defensive standpoint, but I don't think it's what everyone's used to, and they are also very correctable. He turns it over, he makes some mistakes. So I just think that they're so heavily dependent on defense and kind of controlling the clock and running the football. And I don't think their offensive line is as dominant as it has been as well. So I do think Alabama is very vulnerable. And the whole SEC is kind of just a Wild West. Even Georgia. I think Georgia's...
Especially with the Brock Bowers injury now, too.
Yeah, it's just... The SEC is going to be extremely, extremely cutthroat. And I don't think the days of the reigns of Alabama and someone just upsetting them and then no one's worried about it, or Georgia the same way, 1 loss and they go into the SEC championship game and go to the college football playoffs and roll again. I think those days are over, especially in that conference. But I do think Alabama is extremely vulnerable.
Last thing I'll ask you, need an official prediction. Christian Hackenberg, the former Penn State quarterback, Penn State, Ohio State this weekend. What's the score going to be?
Ooh, I do think it's going to be a tight one. I do think the defenses are going to come up. I got the Nittany Lions winning somewhere in the range of like 28-24, 27-31, something like that. It's going to be, I think it's going to be a dogfight. It's going to come down to 3 or 4 plays by the guy pulling the trigger on either side, who can make them and who can't.
What was the toughest environment you've ever had to play in, by the way? Because that crowd, and the Penn State fan always travels, but that's going to be a crazy Ohio State crowd this weekend.
No, it's crazy. And it's funny. I was talking to Joshua Perry earlier this week about it. And the shoe at noon is way different than the shoe at night. The shoe at night is extremely tough. I did that twice. It's nuts. But he said, the noon games in Columbus are always tough for the fans to get up for. So hopefully that plays in the
spoiled fan base. What a bunch of losers. You can't get up for a noon game? Come on.
Unbelievable. But the shoe's tough. Wisconsin's unbelievable too. If you're up, that's a great environment. But the shoe is definitely tough. Those guys, they do like to get after the boys in blue and white too. So that's always fun, the banter back and forth with the fans.
Christian Hackenberg, always appreciate the time. Thanks so much for doing this.
Zach, appreciate you, bro.
There you go. He's Christian Hackenberg joining us for a few minutes on the Zach Gelb Show on CBS Sports Radio. Let's get the latest CBS Sports Radio update in with the Ackman, Rich Ackerman.
CBS Sports Radio. Sports Flash.
Week 7 of the NFL season opens with the Jaguars and Saints in New Orleans, where Jacksonville has never won in 3 previous tries. The Jags riding a 3-game winning streak, but will face the league's 5th-ranked defense with Trevor Lawrence less than 100%. He is expected to start, though, despite a knee injury.
How much do you push? I think a little bit is good, and so that line is always kind of moving, though. It depends on how you're trying to do everything you can to obviously to play, but then you don't want to hurt yourself worse, all those things. And I feel good with where I'm at right now, so we're just kind of taking it day by day and seeing how it gets better.
Deshaun Watson practiced today for the first time in nearly a month. He's been dealing with a bruised rotator cuff. Jimmy Garoppolo has been ruled out for Sunday against the Bears with a back injury. Michigan is under investigation by the NCAA for alleged sign stealing. The Wolverines are accused of sending people to scout future opponents, which is prohibited. The NLCS resumes shortly in Arizona, which has now lost back-to-back games after winning 5 in a row. The Phillies have hit 6 homers in the first 2 games and will face Brandon Pfaadt, while Ranger Suarez starts for the Phils. And after falling behind 2 games to none, losing twice at home, the Astros now look to return the favor to the Rangers with Game 4 coming up tonight. Texas still in front 2-1. I'm Rich Hackenberg.
CBS Sports Radio.
You're in a 5-minute break. Four minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Four minutes remaining. Three minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Three minutes remaining. Two minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Two minutes remaining. 1 minute, 30 seconds remaining. One minute remaining. Forty-five seconds remaining. Thirty seconds remaining. Fifteen seconds. Break ends in 5 seconds.
He's live. He's nationwide on CBS Sports Radio.
I had no expectations for the Patriots heading into this season other than not making the playoffs. I was not a believer in this Patriot team. But why I'm waving the flag is they need to move on from Mac Jones at the end of this season. I still don't believe Bill Belichick is going to get fired. I still think when you win 6 Super Bowls and how close him and Robert Kraft are, that Bill Belichick will be afforded another opportunity next season.
This is the Zach Gelb Show. Here's your host, Zach Gelb.
And this portion of the show is brought to you by Wesley Financial. Stuck in a timeshare and want out? Contact Wesley Financial Group now and get a free timeshare exit information kit at wesleyfinancialgroup.com. Time to get to Take 5.
As the dust settles from last week's games, it's time to look at which teams are rising and which are falling.
And there's an interception.
Zach ranks his top 5 NFL and college football teams on this week's edition of Take 5, only on the Zach Gelb Show.
So Take 5 Wednesday on a Thursday, because I was out yesterday on a Wednesday. But we always got to give you our power rankings each and every week in college football and the NFL. Let me go college football first. In at number 5, Florida State. I do think Florida State, and I picked them to win the ACC before the season started, is on upset watch this week. I like Mike Elko a lot. I think he's a really phenomenal coach and an underrated coach. And I actually wanted him at one point to be the head coach of my Temple Owls, who are just a miserable football program right now. But Mike Elko's done a good job early on in his first 2 years at Duke. And Florida State, sure, they have 2 really good wins to their resume. I know LSU has not aged well, but at the time, LSU was thought to be a national championship contender. I didn't think they would have 2 losses this young into the season. But back in week 1, Florida State destroyed LSU in the second half. And then good football teams find a way to win when they don't play their best brands of football. And that's what Clemson did. That's what Florida State did up against Clemson. So I put Florida State in at 5. Love their quarterback in Jordan Travis. But this week, it would not surprise me if this time next week we are talking about Florida State out of our top 5 here, because Duke is very much so alive this week. All righty, in at number 4, Oklahoma. I would say that's the second best football game that I've saw this season in college football. Number 1 was Washington and Oregon, but 2 weeks ago, Red River definitely did live up to the hype with Oklahoma and Texas, and what a fun football game that was between those 2 teams and what did transpire on the football field. And Oklahoma now has a path where they should be going to the Big 12 championship game, and we'll see if they could go get another victory in that Big 12 championship game, especially if they're going up against Texas once again. But that could be an enormous task to go beat Texas twice if Texas is in the Big 12 championship game. But Oklahoma, if they go down any other time in this regular season, it would be a disappointment. I love what Brent Venables has done. Dylan Gabriel has done a very nice job here in year number 2 at Oklahoma, and that defense is starting to come alive where it was god-awful a year ago. So Oklahoma is in at number 4. In at number 3, this is a team that before the year, just like Florida State, I identified as the best team in their conference. I love Kalen DeBoer. He only has 2 losses in his first 2 years at Washington, and both of those losses were by 8 points or fewer. And this win that he just had up against Oregon, which was such a joy and a fun game to watch, with it being back and forth, both coaches being super duper aggressive, and Michael Penix just being hurt and playing through that pain and stepping up and delivering. It was unfortunate that the game ended. I know if you're a fan of the Huskies, you're not like bitching and complaining, but it was unfortunate that you had in such a great game it come down to a kicker just not being able to make a kick. Because as a college football fan, where, yeah, I could like Washington slightly over Oregon, and just because I picked Washington heading into the season, but I have no disdain for either football team. And as a college football fan, I felt as if we were robbed seeing overtime, because the kicker for Oregon just has to simply make that chip shot and get that game into overtime. But Washington is a force. Washington has right now the Heisman Trophy favorite and the odds-on favorite to win the Heisman Trophy. And you have a unbelievable receiver as well, Rome Odunze. And this is a Washington team that it's not a matter of if I think, right, they could get to a Pac-12 championship game and win the Pac-12, because they have the talent to do so. You just look around at the Pac-12, they are loaded with talent. They are loaded with teams, and it's a shame that the Pac-12 is in its final season, because the Pac-12 is eventually going to beat up on one another, and the strong teams are going to go down, and you're going to have surprises and upsets and all this stuff just because of how well-rounded and well-loaded this conference is. But I put Washington in at 3. Number 2, I said I would not move this team out of the number 1 spot until they did go down. And Georgia, we all know what has been built there by Kirby Smart and what they have done the last 2 years. And it's one thing to say, oh, Georgia is not as good as they've been in years past. And there's merit to that this year, and they could still win the national championship game. But I do believe the Brock Bowers injury does change things, where Brock Bowers could come on back. And it's 4 to 6 weeks. We'll see if there's any hiccups and any roadblocks from him returning around Thanksgiving or for the SEC title game, or if there's a want to by Brock Bowers to come back, who's already asserted himself as the preeminent tight end in the country, has already asserted himself as he'll be the first tight end off the draft board come April, and he's a force. He should be a top 10 pick, top 15 pick, and he's already won not 1 but 2 national championship games. So maybe Brock Bowers makes a business decision and say, coming off this surgery, I'm not going to return for Georgia. I don't know what Brock Bowers is going to do, but until Brock Bowers comes back, even though Georgia's still really damn good, and to be the champ, you got to beat the champ, that vulnerability and that feeling that Georgia could be got now just gets intensified, because we don't know when their best player is definitely going to be coming back. So I have dropped Georgia, who's been the 1 spot all throughout the year, down to number 2. And in at number 1, I know you could sit there and tell me Michigan hasn't played anybody. And Michigan, coming up in a few weeks, they do have that game up against Penn State on November 11th. And then the final game of the season, Thanksgiving weekend, they do have the Ohio State Buckeyes. But J.J. McCarthy had a ridiculous throw. I know it's all beat up against Indiana, but it was a Mahomes-like throw with the underhand. And McCarthy's playing some really good football. You got the 1-2 punch of Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. It seems, Roman Wilson gets a touchdown every week, but they're loaded with wide receivers. They're well built in the trenches on the offensive side and the defensive side of the ball. They may be looking at some other team signs, which could always help, and I say that in jest. But I do think right now, with the Bowers injury to Georgia, Michigan's the most well-rounded team in the country. Now, you could tell me they haven't played anybody, but they'll get the benefit of the doubt with what they've done the last 2 seasons. So there's my 5 in college football. I go Florida State 5, Oklahoma 4, Washington, welcome back to the top 5 after last weekend at number 3, Georgia 2, and Michigan 1. Samter, speak now, forever hold your peace. Give me some teams that you think could maybe have a case to be made to be inside my top 5.
We just had Christian Hackenberg on Ohio State, Penn State this weekend. You have neither of those teams in your top 5. What's going on?
So it's the record for James Franklin up against top 10 teams, where I give Michigan the benefit of the doubt, even though they haven't played anybody. Whenever James Franklin plays somebody, he's 3-15 in his career up against teams in the top 10 at Penn State. So that's why I don't have Penn State in there. And for Ohio State, their best win of the season was Notre Dame. It's a wonderful win, but I wasn't impressed with Ohio State. I was more, what the heck did Notre Dame, had they lose that game with the dropped interception and only having 10 guys on the field? So no Ohio State, no Penn State, but if one of those teams, whoever wins this weekend, not if, when one of those teams win this weekend, it could be a different conversation next week. Last team?
How about Drake Maye and UNC, those Tar Heels?
Yeah, they're making a run, and everyone's not talking about them in the ACC because of what Florida State has done. Let's see where they're at in a few weeks, but there's a case being made for Drake Maye. You also get back Tez Walker. All righty, let's go to the NFL. Dolphins in at number 5. I think the Dolphins could eventually be at the number 1 spot, but they did lose to Buffalo. Enormous test this week with the Philadelphia Eagles in a tough environment. They're just a loaded team, and they're going to eventually get healthier with Achane coming back, Jalen Ramsey coming back, Jalen Phillips as well, and Xavier Howard. So they're getting only healthier, and Tua Tagovailoa has done a phenomenal job this season, and Mike McDaniel's turning into be a really special coach. But Dolphins in at number 5 because of the Buffalo loss. 4, it's the San Francisco 49ers. They've dropped a few spots because of losing to the Cleveland Browns last week. I know that they had McCaffrey get hurt and Debo get hurt and Trent Williams get hurt in the game, and they could have had the Jake Moody kick go in, and they probably don't fall. But I have to drop the 49ers down to 4 after the loss. Eagles lose as well. I think the Eagles are slightly better than the 49ers. They lose to the Jets, so that's why I dropped the 49ers. I have to drop the Eagles as well. And then Kansas City, with all their flaws, they only have 1 loss on the season, and they lost to the team that's in at the number 1 spot, and that is the Detroit Lions, who continue to hum and continue to bite off some kneecaps. The Lions are my number 1 spot. So Dolphins 5, 49ers 4, Eagles 3, Chiefs 2, Lions 1. Samter, speak now, forever hold your peace.
There's not a lot of other teams that I can think of. How about the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson 4-2?
Yeah, the injuries are a concern there, and I still go back to 2 weeks ago where they lost to the Steelers, a game they should have won. Did not like the way the receivers dropped so many footballs, and Lamar Jackson made that mistake at the end with the interception.
And then last one, Josh Allen, the Bills. They're up and down, but at times they look great.
They do, and it's a lack of consistency. That's the problem for me. Like, when you go up against the Giants, and the Giants don't have Daniel Jones, and the Giants don't have a great team to begin with, you can't almost lose that game. And if the officials throw another flag, they may have lost that game. If Tyrod Taylor doesn't run the ball at the end of the first half, they probably lose that game as well. For Buffalo, they have the ceiling to be the best team in the league, but it's too much up and down with the Buffalo Bills. So for the NFL one more time, Dolphins 5, 49ers 4, Eagles 3, Chiefs 2, Lions 1 after week 6. And for college football, Florida State, Oklahoma, Washington, Georgia, Michigan, 5-1 being that order. Coming on back, Zach Gelb Show, CBS Sports Radio.
You're in a 5-minute break. Four minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Four minutes remaining. Three minutes, 30 seconds remaining. 3 minutes remaining. Two minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Two minutes remaining. One minute, 30 seconds remaining. One minute remaining. Forty-five seconds remaining. Thirty seconds remaining. Fifteen seconds. Break ends in 5 seconds.
He's live. He's nationwide on CBS Sports Radio. This is the Zach Gelb Show. Here's your host, Zach Gelb.
We continue. This is Zach Gelb Show, coast to coast on CBS Sports Radio, hour number 3 of our radio program. So there's two stories right now about Caleb Williams, and the other is with Lincoln Riley. Let's tackle the Caleb Williams report first, that whoever drafts him, he's going to ask them for partial ownership of the team. This is the biggest, nonsense story I've ever seen. You may want ownership of the team, but it's not something that's going to happen. And also, could you imagine if you are someone that is highly touted and you haven't done anything yet in the professional world? And let's just say, I don't know, this was on Wall Street. And I know it's always tough to compare real world to the sports world, because the sports world is not the real world, and these crazy scenarios and these crazy conversations just don't happen in real life. But if you had someone that was top of their class at some fancy schmancy business school that I would never get into, and they're a big deal, and they go on to Wall Street and they're like, oh, I'm entitled to this, and this, and I need this off this sale and all that stuff. It's like, what are you doing? Can you at least show that you belong first before you have, I don't want to say big aspirations because everyone should dream big, but the potential of demanding that you should get partial ownership of the team. It's just not a realistic ask. Like Aaron Rodgers, there was that report that he wanted partial ownership of the Jets. If that didn't happen for Aaron Rodgers, who has won a Super Bowl, who has won multiple MVPs in this league, who is going to the Hall of Fame, it's not happening for Caleb Williams. And I think the world of Caleb Williams as a football player, right? People are comparing him to Patrick Mahomes. We'll see if he turns out to be anywhere close to what Mahomes has done. But what we've seen in college outside of the Notre Dame game this past weekend, and everyone has a bad game. It's just unfortunate for him that it happened with everyone watching up against Notre Dame. And, now people are going to look at USC. And I already thought that USC wasn't going to a college football playoff this year, more so because I thought their defense would crumble. It wasn't the defense's fault. Not that they played this great game up against Notre Dame defensively, but the reason they lost that game on Saturday evening was because the quarterback didn't clear 200 yards passing, and he threw not one, not two, but three footballs to the other team. And if your offense isn't getting to the level that it's expected week in and week out, and that's a tough standard to play with because eventually you're going to be human and you're going to need your defense to win a game, and the defense wasn't able to do that. But the surprising part with that Ohio State, or it should be that USC loss up against Notre Dame, it wasn't that they lost, it was just how they lost. Because we all think the world of Caleb Williams. But this idea that Caleb Williams, we all know is going to be probably the number one overall pick, walks into, New England or Denver or Arizona, Chicago, and goes, now I need to be a partial owner of the team? Like, that's not going to happen. And also, I'm pretty sure, because we saw this with Brady, that if Tom Brady was going to be a minority owner of the Raiders and still wanted to play, when that was in the infant stages, and I know there hasn't been any update, and I know that the deal seems like it's on life support, and we don't know if Brady's ever going to be that minority owner with the Raiders, but the other owners would have to approve it. And there's no way owners are going to approve of Caleb Williams because it sets this precedent of any other highly touted pick or any other number one pick that's a franchise quarterback demanding partial ownership of the team, and owners aren't going to do that. So I don't understand where this stuff comes from, how this report ended up coming together, but any conversation further of Caleb Williams before taking a snap in the NFL, with him being a minority owner in the NFL, is just a giant, and I mean a giant, waste of time. Because I'm not saying he shouldn't have that dream, he shouldn't have that hope, but getting it before you do anything on a football field, and for other reasons why you're not going to get it, it's just not going to happen. So we could kind of lay that conversation to rest. But I thought the more fascinating two conversations with USC is there's going to be a good debate with Drake Maye at UNC and also Caleb Williams at USC on who's going to be the number one overall pick. Now, I thought what Christian Hackenberg said earlier is fascinating, where you had Bryce Young, you had C.J. Stroud. It seemed like C.J. Stroud made a legitimate push to be the number one overall pick. You got to remember Frank Reich, from the reports from Adam Schefter, he wanted C.J. Stroud. It was David Tepper who wanted Bryce Young. But Bryce Young was tabbed throughout the college football season as that guy heading into the season that was going to be the number one overall pick. And then at the end of the season, people looked at Bryce Young last year at Alabama, and they were like, oh, he lost 2 games. Yeah, Alabama didn't win the SEC. Alabama didn't get into an SEC championship game. Alabama didn't even get into the college football playoff, but it wasn't Bryce Young's fault. Like last year, you look back at that Alabama team, it was really Bryce Young and Jahmyr Gibbs on the offensive side of the ball, and there wasn't a lot left to be desired. And you had Alabama lose 2 games for Alabama standard. That's not good. That's not bueno. But they lost those games close, and it wasn't because of who the quarterback was. So we all knew that Bryce Young was going to be the number one overall pick. The only concern about Bryce Young was his size or lack of it. And it was going to take a lot for Bryce Young not to be the number one overall pick. And that was even with the team that traded up to the number one spot, having their new head coach wanting C.J. Stroud to be the number one overall pick and knocking Bryce Young down. And Bryce Young, as good of a player as I think he can be, he is not Caleb Williams. He is not talked about the way Caleb Williams is talked about. And I would say in the last 10 years, there are two quarterbacks that we sat there and all we did was say that those quarterbacks were can't-miss quarterbacks. And that was Andrew Luck coming out of Stanford, where everyone knew he was going to be the number one overall pick. And practically for, 3 years? We all knew whenever Trevor Lawrence was eligible that he was going to be the number one overall pick as well. And look at those two guys and the way that they were talked about. Those were considered to be generational talents. Like, there was a tank for Tua, debate and conversation, and Tua ended up being the second quarterback, or the second quarterback taken in that draft, and Tua fell, but that was because of an injury and the emergence of Joe Burrow too. But the way that Caleb Williams is talked about, it is a can't-miss prospect, no flaws with Caleb Williams right now, similarly to the way that we thought about Andrew Luck at Stanford and then Trevor Lawrence at Clemson as well. So if we saw a push be made, even by some of the Carolina Panthers who had the number one overall pick, to try to knock Bryce Young down and elevate C.J. Stroud, and that still didn't happen, even though Drake Maye could go on to be a great quarterback, and he's so highly touted and comes from a family, football family, and Drake Maye is doing some excellent stuff this year. I just don't see the scenario where Caleb Williams is not going to be the number one overall pick. And maybe you have an owner that does get a little bit apprehensive with just the ask of him wanting to be a minority owner, but that's never going to happen. And I don't think that's a reason why you go, oh, I'm not going to draft potentially a guy that Tom House, the quarterback coach and the throwing coach last year, he said that Caleb Williams is the closest thing to Patrick Mahomes that he's ever seen, and there's nothing that Caleb Williams could do on a football field nothing Patrick Mahomes can do on a football field that Caleb Williams can't. And Caleb Williams even agreed with the quote as well, as crazy as that sounds. It's always stupid to compare people to Patrick Mahomes, but there is a belief that Williams is that generational player, is that video game player. So regardless of how great Drake Maye continues to be, I would be absolutely shocked if Caleb Williams isn't the number one overall pick. Now, I guess the only way that doesn't happen, and still I think you take him one and then you would trade him, is if he does what Eli Manning and the Manning family did years ago, where they're like, oh, we're not going to that destination. And even though that's always speculated and sometimes that's suggested year in and year out, I think that's very tough to do. I think it's extremely tough to do. And remember, the Mannings had the backing of Archie and of Peyton as well when Eli was coming out of Ole Miss. So I'll be shocked if Caleb Williams, whatever circumstances or scenarios or factors you throw out there, if the team at one eventually says, yeah, we're going to pass it and we're not going to take him because we're afraid of this, we're afraid of that, you take who the best player available is. And on paper right now, Caleb Williams, not only the best player available, he's a franchise-altering, franchise-changing player that we think is going to be the case in the NFL. And then there's one final USC story. And this one, I haven't heard it get a lot of play. But Scott Wolf, who's a part of Inside USC, said in NFL coaching circles, the talk is that Lincoln Riley is putting out feelers about taking a job in the NFL next season. To be clear, this chatter was going around last week and has nothing to do with USC's loss to Notre Dame. The word is Riley would be open to an NFL job if he could follow Caleb Williams to the same franchise. So if the Chicago Bears have the number one pick, it would probably be ideal for this theory. And if you think about it that way, if let's just say the Bears, they're picking number one, just because you're picking number one doesn't mean that you're getting rid of your head coach. Like if Arizona, for example, is picking number one, I don't think they're getting rid of Jonathan Gannon after 1 year. And that's not me saying that Gannon's going to be this great coach. I'm still very iffy on Gannon, even though his teams have responded to him with that one win early on in the season. But they're playing tough in circumstances that are not ideal, and a football team that is not all that good this year, and they're absolutely terrible and putrid. But a team like the Bears, I have a hard time envisioning right now. There's still a question about what's going to happen with Fields. But I don't think Poles is back next year. Ryan Poles, the GM. And I don't think Matt Eberflus is back. So if you're the number one pick, you're going to be taking Caleb Williams. Do you want to bring in someone that's very familiar and the most familiar with Caleb Williams in Lincoln Riley, who not only was his coach at Oklahoma, was also his coach at USC? And at first, my first instinct says, draft Williams, leave Lincoln Riley. And I would not hire Lincoln Riley in the NFL. And a lot of times college coaches don't go on to have success in the NFL. There's a few guys that have done it before. But Lincoln Riley, even with how well he's perceived in college football, it's not as if he's this perfect college football coach. Like, his defense has been horrible, was bad at Oklahoma, has been brutal at USC. And offensively, as great as this guy has been, and right, how innovative he has been, and how well respected he has been, guy has never won a college football playoff game. You know, that guy for years dominated the Big 12. That guy was in the college football playoff a ton, and he's not able to win one with Heisman Trophy winners and Heisman Trophy finalists. Not able to win one college football game. So Lincoln Riley, and I believe this, he's definitely a guy that you want coaching college football. Lincoln Riley is a really good coach. But I'm not even ready to say, like, he's this must-have, all-time great coach that I need to see him get to the NFL. Now, he may want to go to the NFL because even though he had it made for himself at Oklahoma, right, he's a different dude. He takes the USC job. Now he has it made at USC. Coaching college football, and we could play the small violin here, I get it, but coaching college football is not easier than coaching NFL. And I'm talking about from a personal lifestyle, because now you have the transfer portal. You're constantly recruiting in college football as well. In the NFL, there's an actual offseason. In the NFL, you don't have to deal with recruiting. You don't have to deal with the name, image, and likeness stuff. And this has been a guy, right, reportedly, or it's been discussed, that he may not want to coach past 50. So if he's got like 10 years left of coaching, and just because coaches say that doesn't mean that they're definitely going to leave. I know he's close with McVay. It seems like McVay the last 2-3 years is 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and he just signed an extension with the LA Rams. But there could be a desire for Lincoln Riley to go to the NFL. And if I'm an NFL team, I would not hire him. I have him stay in college. But the allure of Williams and Riley as a package, it is fascinating because circumstance and situation on where you get drafted to does matter. And no one knows Williams better than Riley, but I have not been jaw hitting the floor level impressed on Riley as a college head coach, where the guy hasn't won a college football playoff game ever, where I go, oh, just because he coached Caleb Williams, I have to now bring him in as the head coach. I would bring in a more veteran, savvy NFL coach, or a coordinator that's been a coordinator for a while or has been in the NFL for a while, to go team up with Caleb Williams if, let's say, a team like the Bears gets the number 1 overall pick and you're looking for a new coach, and also you're selecting the services of Caleb Williams. But I saw that report, and it has not got a lot of play. I don't know the validity to it. I could see why Riley would want to go to the NFL, but I'm still going to assume, Riley just feels like a college coach to me. He does. He does not feel like an NFL head coach. And with how few have actually worked in the NFL, there also has to be a desire from an NFL team to want to hire Lincoln Riley as well. I'm sure like 1 or 2 of them would end up saying yes, but to also be packaged with Caleb Williams, it seems like a good idea. And I could understand why people say it, but I feel as if it's probably more fantasy. So could you see Lincoln Riley coaching to the NFL? Could you see him coaching Caleb Williams in the NFL as well? 855-212-4CBS, 855-212-4227. And is there anything that Drake Maye can do to usurp Caleb Williams as the thought-to-be number 1 pick in the NFL draft coming up in April in Detroit? And Santa, I don't know about you, by the way, but, we've been to the draft the last few years for CBS Sports Radio. I think last year people said Detroit was the location, and we know that was the location last year. It was like, okay, it's Detroit, whatever. Now with the Lions being a happening football team, I think Detroit's going to be one raucous atmosphere at the draft, because usually you'd be thinking about the Lions and then picking in the top 10. they won't be picking in the top 10 this year. They could actually be celebrating a season with a team that was very, very special for an organization that hasn't won a division since 1993, a team that hasn't won a playoff game since 1991. And I'm just thinking about this now. That draft coming up in April in Detroit, that could be a big-time party scene. And I don't think Detroit is like the biggest partying town in the world, but you have a lot of passionate football fans that haven't seen a winner in a long time, and this Detroit Lions team is damn good.
Well, we're either going to see a really passionate, enthused, hyped-up fan base, or we're going to see a lot of depressed, really upset fans who haven't sniffed success and came close. Because it's one thing to always suck. It's another thing to get close and then lose. So we'll see what happens at the end of the season. But I do think it's going to be amped up. Detroit loves their football, whether it's their Lions or other teams in general. So I think it'll be fun. April in Detroit will be fine, as opposed to an outdoor Super Bowl like in Minnesota or Detroit a few years back. So I think the weather will be nice.
More than a few years back. Well, we're not. What was Seahawks and Steelers that Super Bowl when Sean Alexander was in the Super Bowl? That's a long time ago in the Jerome Bettis final game.
Did you know that Jerome Bettis was from Detroit?
Yes, yes. That was the last stop for Jerome Bettis and the bus stops here as the big send off was. That was a big storyline that week. Just a little bit.
I think that's one of the 5 most overplayed and outplayed storylines in Super Bowl history.
Oh, now Jerome Bettis is one of the nicest people on this planet.
I heard that he was from Detroit 1,000 times in 3 days. Everything. Oh, Jerome Bettis is from Detroit. Cool. Nice. Move on.
Oh, my God. Man, Samter, you're just like a miserable person. You know what? Santa Claus, just make sure we put some coal in his stocking.
I don't worry about Santa Claus anyway, so I'm not too worried about it. He can skip over my house any day of the week.
Yeah. You know what? If I was Santa, I wouldn't even come down your chimney to go get the cookies. I would say that this house is just going to be filled with negativity. I will not do it. Zach Gelb, Show, CBS Sports Radio, coming on back with a news brief after these short messages.
You're in a 5-minute break. Four minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Four minutes remaining. Three minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Three minutes remaining. Two minutes, 30 seconds remaining. 2 minutes remaining. One minute, 30 seconds remaining. One minute remaining. .45 seconds remaining. .30 seconds remaining. .15 seconds. Break ends in 5 seconds.
Time for your daily news brief. We get you caught up on the rumors, reports, and reconnaissance from the day in sports.
All right, let's start it off with DK Metcalf of the Seahawks. Seahawks coming off a loss to the Cincinnati Bengals. Here is DK Metcalf on his penalties.
I'm not going to change the way I play. If you look at the penalties, there's a taunting, unnecessary roughness, face mask, holding, and I think it was one more in there. So, I'm doing pretty good if I look at it and judge myself, on how I play and just try to be consistent and, have clean hands or whatever the case may be. But, I'm not going to change who I am as a player or a person.
So, I like the Seahawks team. I think they're a good team. Their ceiling, though, is probably at most an NFC title game appearance, and I don't think they're going to get there. I'm not going to freak out here about DK Metcalf. The thing for me, though, that becomes so compelling with the Seahawks is they have a good enough roster with the way that they've drafted the last 2 years, the players that they've had before, where Geno Smith should be able to take this a step further than where they were a year ago. And the game against Cincinnati just gives me a little pause, is that was a game they should have won. And Geno didn't step up to the occasion. So I don't lambaste Geno after one bad performance, but it is something that makes you question, well, how real was last year and how genuine was last year with what we got to see from Geno Smith, where out of nowhere he becomes the comeback player of the year after basically a decade, him being a bad quarterback in the NFL. Let's go to Shane Steichen, the coach of the Colts, first-year head coach, who's now lost his quarterback, Anthony Richardson, for the season following shoulder surgery. Here is Shane Steichen on Anthony Richardson's surgery.
This is the best thing for him and this franchise moving forward so we can get him healthy for next season. Take a guy at fourth overall, tremendous competitor, great player. The longevity of him needs to be at a premium, so this is the best thing for him moving forward.
So you never want to see your potential future quarterback and star quarterback get hurt. With that being said, though, I don't think this is the worst thing in the world, where it stinks that the young man who was off to a great start, Anthony Richardson's now done for the year, but you already had injuries piling up. And this Colts team, the offensive line, even though they're highly compensated, they're not at this great level as they were 2-3 years ago, where they're a good offensive line, but they're not a dominant force that everyone says, oh, Indianapolis Colts, one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Jonathan Taylor just got that new deal. But outside of that, on the offensive side of the ball, I know the receiver Downs, has been good so far, but they need a number one wide receiver. So this offseason, coming off the injury to Richardson, you punt the rest of this year, and you got to be aggressive in free agency to set up your young quarterback in a position to succeed when he's back so you can make him quickly assert to that jump and reach that full potential that Anthony Richardson is capable of. Let's go to Patrick Mahomes. All this talk about Caleb Williams becoming a minority owner. Here is Patrick Mahomes if he'd like to own an NFL team one day.
Yeah, eventually, when I'm done playing. I think Tom's trying to do it right now, but that's definitely where you want to get to because I love this sport and want to give back in any way possible. When I'm done playing, obviously I'll be a Chiefs fan, but at the same time I want to have that competitive edge like I've always had my entire life.
There's certain players that could go into that category and go into that mindset. And I like the way that Mahomes has talked about it where it's after he's playing because while you're playing, it's just not realistic. So I remember last week there was this report that if Sean McVay's wife did go into labor as they're expecting the birth of their first child, he would miss the game, and everyone understands that. I guess the kid has not been born yet, and Sean McVay was asked if he'll miss a game for the birth of his son.
My wife's doing great. I think there was a lot made about me missing a game. I'm not going to miss a game. My son knows better than to come during a game, all right? So that's not going to be anything that we have to worry about.
So, Samter, you're a new father. You have dealt with a pregnant wife recently. There's one thing for Sean McVay to say that, and I thought that was marinated in sarcasm. If his wife goes into labor the day of a game, he's definitely missing the game for the birth of his child, right?
If it was any other coach, I would say absolutely. But Sean McVay seems like one of those dudes where, like, football is life and life is football, where I feel like I could see him, missing the moment, yes.
I would be surprised by it. I really would, especially because that's your first child. And I guess they're having a boy with him saying, his son knows not to come during a football game. But really, McVay, I know he gets that tag of being a football guy and eating, sleeping, and breathing football. This is a dude that has talked about the stress of football and how he wants to focus on his personal life a little bit more. And there was that thought, right after they won the Super Bowl that he was going to walk away. I don't see how you miss the birth of your kid just because of what your job is as a football coach. Here's Deshaun Watson when he was asked, will his shoulder get to 100% anytime soon?
This is going to linger at all this year that's going to affect your passing through the season, or do you think that you'll be 100% at some point?
I'm not sure. This is my first time dealing with a rotator cuff, so I'm just trying to get as comfortable as I possibly can to go out there and perform at the level I know I can. And if I can't, then, we just got to continue to take it day to day. I'm not going to put the team in jeopardy if I can't do certain things.
There's a lot of pressure on Deshaun Watson, and there should be. With everything that happened off the field, which is absolutely disgusting, and then a team says, okay, I'm going to give up all those draft picks for you and give you $240-something million guaranteed, you got to start performing well. Because last year, in the final 6 games you returned coming off the suspension, if you want to tell me he has to knock off rust, that's fine. I don't want to hear the rust excuse this year. I don't want to hear the injury excuse as well. Heck, P.J. Walker just walked in against the San Francisco 49ers. I know P.J. Walker didn't play this great game, but the Cleveland Browns won the game. So everyone understands that Russell Wilson, right, those two quarterbacks that got traded, Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson, that Russ is no longer that dude. For Deshaun Watson, it's still an incomplete if he could go back to being that top 7 quarterback that he was 3-4 years ago. But when you get back on the field, it's go time. And I know a lot of people are going to look at Kevin Stefanski and say, oh, if the Browns don't make the playoffs, they got to get rid of Kevin Stefanski. I'm not in that mindset. This is now on Deshaun Watson. Stefanski and the Browns won that game up against the 49ers. That is a great win. Now you need your franchise quarterback whenever he comes back to start playing like that because you're paying him a lot and you give up a lot of draft picks to go get him. Here is Mike McDaniel when he was asked, is Tua Tagovailoa a system quarterback?
Some folks who believe that many quarterbacks in this scheme with you as the coach, with Tyreek and Jalen, maybe even many quarterbacks would excel, would flourish near the top of the passer rater leading MVP candidate. what, if any, pushback is there relative to, wait, no, hold on. Tua is a little different.
Let's push this podium over. My answer to that would be, who the F cares?
Wow. Well, fiery response there from Mike McDaniel, who's usually someone that just rambles and rambles and rambles, and you're like, what the heck is he saying? And he's not wrong. And that was the thing a few weeks ago when people got annoyed when I said Brock Purdy's more of a system quarterback that maybe one day could turn into a franchise quarterback. If you're winning games, if your team's playing well, you should not care what people are saying about you, because ultimately you're judged off of wins and losses. And if you have more wins than losses, that's all that should matter. And the Dolphins are one of the best teams in the NFL, sitting at 5-1, and they have an enormous game this weekend with a big test to make in South Philadelphia up against the Philadelphia Eagles. Hey, Samter and Sue, let me ask you this real quickly, because, I'm in Miami right now. I'm getting a feel of the fan base. I'm listening to a lot of local radio. Do you think the Miami fans are happy with the national perception right now of Tua Tagovailoa, or do you think they're mad with the national perception of Tua Tagovailoa? How do you guys think the Miami fan believes the national perception is of their quarterback?
I would say that where it is now is probably more aligned to what they believe. I think now the national media is kind of coming over to the idea that Tua, when healthy, is an elite-level quarterback. Mm-hmm. If you asked me this 5-6 weeks ago, they would have been furious with the media nationally, doubting and questioning his arm strength, his durability, his system quarterbackness, and all these different things. Now I would say it's more aligned, but I would still imagine that they're a little bit frustrated, that they still think that there are too many doubters out there in the national media. But I would imagine it's more aligned now than it's ever been with their assessment of him.
Stu, what do you think the perception is?
I think they think it's fair. I think they see that Tua is someone who is good when he's healthy, but when he's not healthy, there are concerns, and there's obviously concerns that he might not be healthy. So I think they're kind of in the same boat as the national media.
So the first show I listened to today, they were fuming, and they were really annoyed because of the system quarterback conversation. Then, once 9:59 turned into 10 o'clock, there was a new show. And they were actually saying, they called Mike Greenberg's show Jet Up, which I thought was very funny instead of Get Up, because of all the love that Greeny shows to the New York Jets. And one of the hosts said, Mike Greenberg was even giving praise to Tua Tagovailoa. So they were happy that more people in the national media are now praising Tua Tagovailoa. But I thought that was fascinating that one show was annoyed saying, people are calling him a system quarterback. And you have Stephen A. Smith saying he only completes like 2-yard passes when they show a highlight of him throwing a 60-yard bomb. And the next show was like, I love the perception out there about Tua Tagovailoa. I think the perception about Tua, if I just had to get a read on it, on what most people should feel, is that he's living up to the potential that he had at Alabama and the way that we thought he was. And it all comes down to him being healthy. But when healthy, in a great environment and a good coach, and also with all these weapons, he has everything right in front of him to go on to be a great quarterback the way that he's playing right now in the NFL and continue that for years to come as long as he does stay healthy. All righty, let's keep it moving. Here's Nick Nurse on if he was surprised that James Harden skipped practice.
Yeah, from the last discussions that I've had with him and from everybody, yeah, it was a little bit. I'm still going on what he said the last time we talked to him. He thought that he was going to ramp up and get ready to play Friday, so we'll see how it goes.
So I don't think anyone should be surprised at anything that James Harden does. James Harden doesn't want to be on the Sixers anymore. I don't think it really makes a lot of sense. Clearly, you don't have a bunch of teams outside of the Clippers that have any interest of acquiring the services of James Harden. James Harden's a loser. James Harden is a great regular season player, a horrible postseason player. He cares more about partying than it actually does in terms of winning basketball games and finally getting that championship. And this is what James Harden does. He goes to a place, he plays well at times, then can't win, and then he starts to turn on the organization and blame someone. The whole thing's a joke. There's Adam Silver has no backbone, and he just allows the players to run the league right now. But if you're James Harden, what are you going to do, not play this year? And if you do, it just shows how much of a loser you actually are. Here is Dusty Baker of the Astros. Astros get on the board in this series. Rangers still lead 2-1 with this series at the Rangers ballpark. Dusty Baker on his team's Game 3 win.
We were close to winning the first 2 games. We were one hit away. We might not have won, but we were one hit away from at least tying it up or going ahead. I mean, this team doesn't quit. We know that the Rangers don't quit either.
We all know the Astros, who have been to 7 straight American League Championship Series, have won 2 World Series in the last 7 years. They're going to be a tough out. Even when they're down 2-0, they're not going to go out without a fight. They're still alive to win this series. Let's see where we are after Game 4. Here is Max Scherzer on his Game 3 performance. Max Scherzer continues to show that he's past his prime. Scherzer coming off the injury, back on the mound, did not go well. Here is Mad Max.
In these situations, look, there's some badness. I get it. But, that's where you kind of got to tune out and look at the good. What was I able to do well? Look, I made some mistakes. I get it. I got punished for it. But there were some good things I also did as well.
So there you have it right there from Max Scherzer. I don't know how much good things he did. In the baseball world right now, you have Game 3 of the NLCS with the Phillies and the Diamondbacks. The Phillies, I say this as a Met fan, they've been such a fun team. They have so many good personalities on that ball club, and they just seem so in sync right now. And remember, they started off slow last year. They fired Girardi. Then they're in the World Series. They lose to the Astros, which are their only 2 losses at home in the last 2 years in the postseason. And now they have a 2-0 lead. Game 3 of the NLCS underway at the end of 2. We do have no score. And it was good in the American League Championship Series that the Astros did get on the board last night. And now we'll see if the Astros could steal Game 4 tonight to even this series back up to 2-2 between the Astros and the Rangers. First pitch will be at 8:03 p.m. Eastern later this evening. It is the Zach Gelb Show on CBS Sports Radio. We'll come on back and we will preview tonight's Thursday night football game between the Jaguars and Saints. All eyes are going to be on the status of Trevor Lawrence for this one. And you have a Saints team. Man, I just can't believe in the Saints. But Jacksonville, they've also showed how good they could be. And then they've had some very questionable losses this season as well. So we'll preview that game coming up on the other side. But first, stream the NFL on Westwood One for free, sponsored by AutoZone all season long. You can listen to every Westwood One broadcast of the NFL live on the NFL app by asking Alexa to open Westwood One Sports or on the Odyssey app. Get in the zone, AutoZone. The free AutoZone Fix Finder service can help you find the fix for free. Get in the zone, AutoZone. Restrictions apply. Here's Rich Ackerman.
CBS Sports Radio. Sports Flag.
Well, Trevor Lawrence is expected to start tonight despite a knee injury when the Jaguars and Saints meet in New Orleans to kick off Week 7 as the Saints try to slow down the Jags, who have won 3 in a row. The Saints are looking to bounce back from Sunday's loss. They need to get their offense in gear. They were held to 13 points in their last loss. The 4th time this year they were held to 1 touchdown or less. Derek Carr said they need to put in a little extra work on a short week.
If it takes extra time studying, if it takes extra time with your coach, whatever it takes to make sure that when those situations come up, we can just do the right things. We have the talent to do the right things, but we have to do the right things, even if the look may change this much, to finish those drives.
Deshaun Watson back at practice for the first time in nearly a month as he has been sitting out with a rotator cuff injury. Michigan under NCAA investigation after allegations of sign stealing. Game 3 of the National League Championship Series and a quiet start right now in Arizona. The Phils and Diamondbacks are scoreless with the Phils up 2-0, while the Rangers saw their 7-game postseason winning streak end last night and now try to avoid a split of the first 4 as they host the Astros tonight in Game 4. I'm Rich Ackerman.
Hey, it's Amy Lawrence. Be sure to listen to CBS Sports Radio at home. Just ask Alexa to play CBS Sports Radio.
CBS Sports Radio.
You're in a 5-minute break. Four minutes, 30 seconds remaining. 4 minutes remaining. Three minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Three minutes remaining. Two minutes, 30 seconds remaining. Two minutes remaining. One minute, 30 seconds remaining. One minute remaining. Forty-five seconds remaining. Thirty seconds remaining. Fifteen seconds. Break ends in 5 seconds.
Hey, this is Howie. And this is Nick from the Backstreet Boys. And you're listening to the Zach Gelb Show on CBS Sports Radio. And guess what? Zach is back. All right.
He's live. He's nationwide on CBS Sports Radio. This is the Zach Gelb Show.
All right, it is the Zach Gelb Show on CBS Sports Radio. Today's memorable moment is sponsored by Prevagen. Prevagen is the most recommended memory support brand by pharmacists. The last time the Saints and Jaguars squared off was in October of 2019 and the Saints won 13-7 behind the fourth quarter TD pass from Teddy Bridgewater to Jared Cook. Man, how about those two names? The Saints lead the all-time series 5-2, with New Orleans winning the last 4 meetings. And I like the Jaguars tonight. I know that Doug Peterson told Ed Warder that the expectation is that Trevor Lawrence is going to be good to go for this game, coming off that injury that he suffered late on Sunday towards the end with the knee injury. But that doesn't matter to me. I think this is more so just my lack of conviction in the Saints rather than it is praising Jacksonville. And there's a lot of reasons to like Jacksonville. The Jaguars have a good young quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. Calvin Ridley has been phenomenal. Travis Etienne has not been talked about enough, but it seems like this dude finds the end zone 1 or 2 times each and every week, especially recently. And we know how tight Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne are going back to their college days. We've had 2 really good games from Josh Allen as well, the pass rusher out of Kentucky. You need Trayvon Walker to start playing a little bit better. And imagine if the Jaguars actually selected Aiden Hutchinson with the number 1 overall pick a few years ago, where they had back-to-back years of the number 1 pick. I thought that was a mistake when they didn't take Aiden Hutchinson and they ended up going with Trayvon Walker. I actually like some other names before I would even have selected or thought about taking Trayvon Walker out of Georgia. But you look at the Saints, this is just not a good team. And the Saints have been a very underwhelming team, where I never thought the Saints were going to be good this year. But with the Saints, their division was thought to be really crappy heading into this season. And Tampa Bay, even though they had a stinker last week against the Lions, where they lost 20-6, is not as good or, is better than what people would have thought. The Falcons, it all comes down to, will Arthur Smith start using his brain a little bit? And will he run the ball more with Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier instead of just asking Desmond Ridder to throw the ball more times than he's capable of and trying to be a pass-first team where you have all these weapons that are filled with speed, run the ball more and put the ball more in the hands of Bijan and Tyler Algier and allow Desmond Ridder, who no one thinks is a franchise quarterback, to be a game manager instead of trying to win off the arm of Desmond Ridder and trying to prove a point that Desmond Ridder is your franchise quarterback. It's just coaching to your strengths, and the Falcons aren't doing that right now. And you can forget about the Carolina Panthers. I know Brian's in the chat back from his sports hiatus as he's trying to cleanse himself from all of his teams losing, but the Panthers absolutely stink. But then you look at the Saints, it's like New Orleans has all this talent, and the Saints are perceived to be that team. I can't trust Derek Carr, and I can't trust this team to stay healthy. But you go through really the Saints' schedule this year. They beat Tennessee by 1 point in week 1. The Tennessee Titans stink. The Panthers, you beat them in week 2. It was more of a blowout, and it ended up being a backdoor cover where the Panthers lost 20-17. The Panthers are the worst team in the NFL. You had a lead up against the Packers. You were up 17-0 entering that fourth quarter, and then the Packers rallied to score 18 unanswered in the fourth quarter. You had a really good run by Jordan Love in that game, an insane catch by Romeo Doubs as well. And then Tampa Bay, they get blown out 26-9. They beat the Patriots 34-0. I say this as a Patriot fan. The Patriots suck. They're garbage. They're terrible this year. And last week, you lose to the Texans. So the Saints have just been bad. I know they have 3 wins, and I know their record is 3-3. But when your 3 wins are Tennessee, the Panthers, and the Patriots, why should I believe that you are actually any good? So I know that the Saints are home tonight. That's always a tough environment to play in, and that's a very tough spot. But this Saints team, I don't think, is all that good. So I'll trust Peterson. I'll trust Travis Etienne Jr. and whatever the health is now of Trevor Lawrence more than anything the Saints have to be offered, because the Saints are the Saints are mediocre, and the Jaguars may not be a great team, but they are a good team. So I'll trust the Jacksonville Jaguars coming up later tonight on Thursday Night Football to start off Week 7 of the season. Let's go to Ethan in Pennsylvania, 855-212-4CBS, 855-212-4227. Ethan is next up on the Zach Gelb Show on CBS Sports Radio. Ethan, what's shaking?
Hey, how you doing, Zach?
Doing great.
Good. Wanted to thank you. I've been listening to Sports Talk Radio forever, and I've never heard a Michigan and Lions poll where they're both first. So Appreciate that.
Maybe the last time too, Ethan, if we're being honest here.
It could change. And then got a question for you, and I'll hang up and listen. These allegations against Michigan, as far as sign stealings, just wanted to know your thoughts on that, and if it's just the NCAA being as petty as they always are. And I'll hang up and listen.
Yeah, Ethan, appreciate the phone call. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but we could bring it back up here and rehash it. There was part of me today, just being a human being and not trusting, right, the NCAA or sports, where I go, okay, the NCAA had an issue with Harbaugh because they didn't think he was forthcoming with the recruiting allegations, and he had to self-impose a 3-game suspension earlier in the year, Michigan, and there's probably still more to come from that, where I'm like, are they, not that they're making up things, because there has to be merit to something in some capacity. You talk about the seriousness, that's a different conversation. But are they going after Jim here, where a lot of other times the NCAA sits on their hands and tries not to go after other people? They usually go after people that they're upset with. That did cross my mind. The thing is, though, even if you're sending someone, and I get it, the rules are the rules, to go to another game to try to get the signals and all that, it's like now we're in a building where fans, 100,000 people could be on a camera and they could film the sidelines and get the signs. I just don't think it's a big deal. I've always thought in football, sign stealing now, especially with everything going over the headset, is really just a non-story. If I'm a Michigan fan, though, here, and I happen to be somewhat of a Michigan fan as well, with my two best friends going to Michigan and owning a Leroy Hoard jersey, who I saw today in these Miami studios. I always love seeing Leroy. I do believe that this is it for Harbaugh at Michigan, where if an NFL job this offseason comes to him and they say, we want you to be the head coach, I think he takes it. Because a lot of coaches, especially in college, it's a tougher era now in NIL, in also the transfer portal too. Plus, if you have the NCAA breathing down your neck, where a lot of us roll our eyes and go, the NCAA never gets it right. Remember, this is the same organization that they used to allow programs to provide bagels to the players, but if they provided cream cheese, that was an infraction. And I could see Harbaugh saying, as much as I love Michigan, I'm done, and I'm going to go to the NFL, but it requires an NFL team to offer him a job. All righty, that's it for the Zach Gelb Show today. We'll be back tomorrow for a Football Friday. Danny Cannell will join us in addition to Ryan Horvat. Big thanks to Samson and Stu, each and every one of you, for calling, listening, and tweeting. We'll be back tomorrow, everybody. We out. Bye-bye. Peace!